Welcome to your in-depth monthly astrology overview and zodiac forecast for January 2026. I'm going to share some of the powerful standout features of the month ahead to begin with. Then on screen I'll share the event chart, which provides a backdrop for the whole of January. I'll then go through each of the influences in detail to give us a collective understanding of what we can expect. Please stay with me. I'll then go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, which you can relate to in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. And I'll share an event chart for each of those zodiac signs too. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. A very warm welcome. Your views, comments and likes are truly appreciated. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please help it to continue to thrive and do so now. We have found that over 50% of people who regularly watch my videos are not subscribers. If that's you, please help to support the channel. As we go into a new year, we can have a sense of renewal and hope. Also, we can do things like set our intentions or perhaps try to be conscientious about our New Year's resolutions. But as we enter the year, it's not the astrological year we're entering, it's the calendar year. And in fact, we're entering into the new year in Capricorn season, which is also cardinal quadrant 4, so the last 13-week period of the overall astrological year, which begins with the spring equinox. Now, Capricorn energy is very much about culmination in the physical world, but what we have this year right from the off is a powerful collective, not just the Sun, but also Mars and Venus too. And in fact, all three are going to be very closely together through the first 3 weeks of this month. Also, Mercury, the planet of commerce, of communication and messengers, is going to move into Capricorn later on the 1st, but not before coming into conflict with Saturn, the ruler of the sign of Capricorn, but also the dreamy energies of Neptune. And I think that's a very powerful square. Now we're going to have 4 Cazimis this month. Cazimis are when the Sun is unified exactly with another planet. We have one with Venus, then Mars, then Mercury, then Pluto. That's incredibly powerful and very rare indeed. But also that Capricornian energy is going to reach a high point on the 18th with a new moon before switching into the sign of Aquarius. So Aquarius season starts in earnest on the 20th, when both the Sun but also Mercury make their way into the sign, playing catch up with Venus, which moved earlier. But then Mars is also going to join them as well, and therefore the last 10 days of this month is going to be much more to do with the progressive energies of Aquarius rather than the traditional vibe of Capricorn. Now, if you'd like to order your personal forecast for year 2026 based on your unique birth data, you'll get your Life Roadmap report as well. This helps us to understand the patterns that have played out in our lives so far. You also get my free gift of your general love, Chinese and Indian written forecast for the year ahead. But if at the checkout you apply Astro 26, you'll get them half price, 50% off. That's Astro 26. And don't worry when you order. If you order in December, I will give you to the end of 2026. If you order later in January, I'll give you a full 12 months through to the end of January 2027. You can also check out your deep dive for your year 2026 forecast by seeing the link beneath this video too. So on the screen now, I'm showing the event chart, and you can see that we have that cluster of energy in the sign of Capricorn, but very much to do with Venus and the Sun. Now they're going to come into an exact conjunction, the Cazimi, on the 6th, but Mars is very close to them too, and Mars is exalted in Capricorn, likes to be here. So the thrust, the drive, the passion, the determination, the energy, the action of Mars, very close to the Sun. The Sun in Capricorn can be quite steady. It's about sustained effort over a long period of time. But if we have ambitions, the position of Mars is bringing a greater sense of urgency. But what Venus brings is the potential to also bring some subtlety to bear as well. So it's not just what we say, it's how we say it. And obviously relationships can be part of Venus's magic, but also it can be about money. So I think one of the big topics as we come into this new year collectively is going to be finance, but also property, because of the structural influence of Capricorn that comes from its ruler Saturn. But just look at the position of Mercury. It moves later on the 1st of January into Capricorn, joining up with that Capricorn posse. But if you look at the position of Neptune, Mercury and Neptune are pretty well exactly squared. So whatever we're wanting to discover in terms of information, which can be Mercury in Sagittarius, and Mercury here is detrimented, we need to make sure that what we are reading or what we are researching is precisely accurate, because it is possible that we could get a little confused or disorientated, particularly if we're making any travel plans. But if we're discussing a business deal, a contract, that does mean that it's important to be conscious of the small print. And you can see that Saturn is also in a square with Mercury as we come into this new year as well. I think the outcome of this, because Mercury in Sagittarius can be about publishing, it can be about broadcasting, it can be about films, it can be about travel, it can be about international trade, it can be about borders. What I think is going to happen throughout January is more information is going to come into the open, and some of that information is what other people don't want us to know about. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is Chiron. Chiron is going to go direct after its 5 months retrograde on the 2nd of January, but it's in the sign of our identity Aries. And that retrograde, about 5 degrees, has given us a lot of food for thought since July. But Chiron is forging a square with Jupiter. Jupiter in Cancer, like Mars in Capricorn, is exalted. So that's nice. It's just that the potential here is that we could try and protect how we feel in situations by, in a way, over gilding the lily. So perhaps being a little defensive or trying to use extra optimism to cover where we may feel a little frail. But I feel that Chiron going forwards is definitely going to be helpful. Now, in a very constructive way, we do have the energy of Uranus itself still in retrograde in a very positive angle to Saturn and Neptune. And we are having an opportunity to rethink our values, Uranus in Taurus, and also because Saturn and Neptune are coming to the end of their journey, big journeys. In Saturn's case, 29.5 years, in Neptune's case, 165 years, and Neptune comes to the end of its journey on the 26th of January in the sign of Pisces and returns to Aries, where it spent 6 months last year. This is revolutionizing our connection, but also our value, and perhaps also our spiritual dimension too. And that can be to the fore this month as well. So that's the starting energy, the potential to be ambitious, to focus on where we can be impactful, where we can raise our profile, where we can take more seriously, very Capricornian, our desire for things, but we do need to use some guile, Venus. We need to be aware of the relationships around those ambitions, and we also need to be conscious that there can be misunderstandings and confusion, and also potentially blocks and delays with Mercury squared off with Saturn and also Neptune. If you have got any inner blockages, one of the things that we can all do is perhaps seek out sources of information and wisdom. The sign of Capricorn is very much about experience and knowledge, and there may be someone we can watch online or perhaps have an appointment with It can give us a great deal of insight in how to handle a complex matter. But it's also important to tune into our instincts. And I think Neptune, now it's come out of its retrograde and it's on that anaretic degree as we come into this new year, the spiritual dimension has been under pressure. You know, there's been a lot of more assertive and perhaps harsher language that's being used and exchanged amongst us all. And I think Neptune is just reminding us, particularly in that square to the communicator of Mercury, which can be very much about exaggeration in Sagittarius, to stay in touch with how we really feel and not get too caught up in trying to propagate our beliefs and ideals, because actually, you know, it's what's going on deep within us that's really important. And then our connection, if that's well aligned to others, is going to be that much better. But when it comes to our emotional world, moving into the month, the fact that the full moon in the sign of Cancer on the 3rd comes so early in the year is truly significant, I feel. And that's because the moon, of course, rules the sign of Cancer, so it's domiciled, but it's coming face to face with Mars, which is very close, along with Venus, to the Sun. So that full moon suggests that something that we may desire, and it could be in the material world, needs to feel right. And if it isn't feeling quite right, or we try too hard, or we try to push something in order to get what we want, Mars, and therefore that can not necessarily be in tune with what's right for us. So I think for us all, there's a bit of a juggle between tuning into our feelings, what feels secure, where our environment feels comfortable, and just being conscious that chasing the material things in life that many of us do like, whether it's where we live, the type of car we have, status, those things are all good and dandy, but it has to feel right too. And that's really the lesson, I feel, of that particular full moon. And the energy of that will, of course, provide a backdrop for the next 2 weeks. So a bit of a juggle there with Mars so closely in the mix. Now, Venus and Mars together, as they are very close to the Sun, can also be very much about desire. All sorts of desire. It doesn't have to just be in terms of those tangible things that people might want, like a bigger, better property, or somewhere that's safe and affordable, or working in an environment where we feel respected. Those are all very understandable aspirations. But Mars can see us be a bit impatient, or at times perhaps want to boss a situation or dominate in some way, and that's something we need to be aware of, because Jupiter in the sign of Cancer is in an opposition with Mars early in this month, and that, in terms of the world stage, is a big red flag for where people can use force, Mars, because they want to retain control, Capricorn, which dominates in some way that affects people's emotional security, Jupiter. So just be aware of that. But on the 6th, we get the first of those 4 Cazimis. Now, it's Venus in a conjunction with the Sun, and what a Cazimi does is amplify the energy of the other player. So Venus in Capricorn may be a little bit more cautious, perhaps more aware of security, physical security. But if there is someone that you're getting on really well with, it could be the point where you take that next step towards formalising the union. Maybe all the way to marriage, moving in together, signing a lease, meeting your folks' parents for the first time, or just setting intentions to make improvements using the grace and guile that Venus brings. But then we have a very powerful conjunction between the Sun and Mars, which is on the 9th. Think about the thrust of Mars and the ambition of the Sun in Capricorn, and if there is something we want, we're certainly not going to hold back in going for it, but it is important to bring that Venusian energy in, so we're not too focused on getting to the golden prize in a quick way, which could at times maybe be seen as being a little bit indelicate. So especially around a career situation. But what Mercury is going to do before it moves into Aquarius is actually forge some very constructive links to Saturn and Neptune, and also to Uranus. And in fact, all the players in Capricorn are going to go through that, which is intriguing, because when they first went into Capricorn, they were being challenged by Saturn and Neptune. And because Neptune can be about delicacy, it can be about sensitivity, Saturn can be about tradition, but also about working hard at accepting the more emotional or psychological dimension of life and not denying that. But they're all aligning brilliantly as they come to the end of their time in the sign of Capricorn, which is really very intriguing. Brings us to the Capricorn new moon, so very, very close to Mars and Mercury. So our ideas can be thrust across with conviction, but also stable with Saturn, and a degree of subtlety with Neptune, but we can also be very progressive with Uranus. So if you have really, really worked hard on something, not just in this January, but over a long period of time, some kind of big breakthrough is definitely possible. And that could be very gratifying, whether it's around your own enterprise, whether you're coming into the new year wanting to be more entrepreneurial, if you're coming into the new year wanting to use the industry of Capricorn to be a bit more in touch with where you can be more disciplined around health and fitness, those New Year's resolutions, or it is about applying for a new position. But I think some big changes can come in a positive way for many people around about the cusp of the end of the third week of this month. But then what an incredible set of changes. First of all, we have the Sun moving into Aquarius, followed by Mercury. Then we have the third cazimi. Mercury cazimi, I'm sure, is something you've heard of. The amplification of the Sun of Mercury, which is the ruler of the second decan of Aquarius. And some astrologers think that Mercury is accidentally exalted in Aquarius too, which I agree with. So more progressive ideas come in, and you're going to see this in terms of what you read, in terms of the news. There's going to be much more emphasis on how we can work together, how we can network, but also how we can be more progressive and not just be caught up in reaping those more material or worldly benefits. Now, the cazimi with Mercury is actually on the 21st, which happens to be my birthday. So on my solar return, I'll take that. But on the 23rd, we do have Mars playing catch-up, moving into Aquarius too. What a magnificent set of influences. Mars in Aquarius works quite well, I feel, because Aquarius understands that it is not just about I, it is about we. And that softens the ego of Mars somewhat, so we can be uniquely ourselves but still find ways to collaborate. So that's very, very positive indeed. And as we come into the end of the month, we have a series of conjunctions, and it's all bringing Pluto into the picture. Now, Pluto has been in Aquarius full time since November 24. If you remember, first went for 11 weeks into Aquarius in 23, but now it's there through to 243, and that's when it initially makes its way into Pisces before returning to Aquarius, back into Pisces for the long term. So the last 10 days of January, with all that energy connecting to Pluto, could see huge shifts for us all, whether it's around technology, medicine, science, whether it is around communications, transport. There is going to be some radical energies, but also perhaps a reminder about the need for humanity. The world does seem to have become a very ruthless place, and I think there's going to be some pushback about some of that ruthlessness that has prevailed in recent times, and I think that's a very positive thing indeed. But on the 23rd of the month, we do have the Sun-Pluto cazimi, the most potent of the month of all, if we think about it, because the Sun and Pluto together is pure transformation central. So some big shifts, at the end of this month, which will bring a huge amount of excitement to bear. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 signs, but remember you can order your personal forecast for 2026. Get a full 12 months from the time of order. If you order in December, I will do it through to the end of January 27, 50% off. You also get your life roadmap report, but equally you'll get your gift of your general, love, Chinese and Indian zodiac forecast, written forecast for 2026. Welcome Aries to your in-depth monthly horoscope for January 2026. I'm going to give you some standout details to begin with. Then on screen I'll share your event chart as you come into the new year. Always very powerful and provides a backdrop for the whole of the month. I'll then go through each of the influences in detail to give you a clear picture of what you can expect. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code ASTRO26, you'll get 50% off. So as you come into this new year, Aries, there's a big cluster of energy high in the sky. And I think you may have found yourself over recent years trying to reposition where your focus is in terms of your connection to the wider world. And part of the reason for this is Pluto. Pluto was making its way through your sector of success from 2008 through to November 2024 when it moved full time into Aquarius. Now Aquarius is very much the sign for you, which is about where you link to others. It can be through collaboration, cooperation, whereas Pluto in Capricorn was very much about sheer ambition, and the sign of Capricorn is very much about physical culmination. And this month there's a glorious mix of energies there, not least the sun, as it always is as you go into a new year, but you have Venus and Mars collaborating with the sun for the first 3 weeks or 2/3 of January. So your desire and ambition is going to blend well with your people skills that comes from Venus. But tucked away in the back of your chart is Saturn and Neptune. And Neptune is going to join you again on the 26th of January. If you recall, Neptune made its way into your sign at the end of March last year, but exited after 6 months. Well, it's back for the long haul now through to 2038, and that's really significant. If you recall, when Neptune made its way into Aries, we had a heat wave. When it went back into Pisces, we had nothing but rain, particularly in the UK. But also as this month goes on, there's going to be a big shift towards those connections to others. And if you have felt that you've been uncertain about what your long-term plan is, and it isn't working out for you in an old career sector or what you used to do, there may be a sense that something's come into a close. And I'll explore that more deeply with you. But those are the big themes of this month. On the screen now, I'm showing your event chart. Now, your ruler Mars is a fantastic influence. It's obviously hot, and in Capricorn, an earth sign, it uses its drive and passion, but in a very constructive way. It likes to be in Capricorn, it's exalted. But also you can see that Mars very close to the sun, but also to Venus. So whatever it is that you want to visualize in terms of your goals, they're going to be very important at the start of this year. What's not to like? Well, the process is not just setting our intentions, it's how we go about achieving them, and that is through communication. And these days communication can be quite complex because we don't always get the chance to have a human interface, and therefore that technological age that we're all caught up in has huge benefits, but it does make it difficult to display your passion, tenacity and personality power quite as openly as you would like. And Mercury, the planet which rules communication, is challenged strongly by Saturn and Neptune at the start of this new year. So just be conscious that if you've got any doubts or you're not quite sure of what you want to do, that uncertainty could feed into the amount of traction that you can gain in terms of chasing your hopes. But the moon at the start of this new year is in the bubbly Gemini. It's technically peregrine, so it's not so much of an emotional influence, but it is forging a great link to Pluto. So if you can use the communication or the fast communicational energies of the host Gemini and link to people, Pluto, around those goals and ambitions, that's going to help you to overcome to some degree, or challenge at least, Mercury's debilitating square to Neptune, which may cause confusion, and also Saturn. Now Neptune, as I mentioned before, is returning to your sign on the 26th. But if you are someone who's very clear on what you want to achieve, and you've got a very clarified set of aims, not just for January but for the year ahead, I actually feel you could take a giant step forwards in January this year. But it will be important to forge alliances, to create collaborations, and those networks are going to be tested or will come through for you. It depends on exactly where you are. But if you are unsure, collaborating and meeting up and connecting to others becomes a vital part of your journey later on in the month. The other thing to say is since February 2019, Chiron has been in your zodiac sign, asking you to become more conscious of your identity. If you feel you've worked on that well, it could be that you've strengthened your sense of self, built up greater resilience. But Jupiter is squaring off with Chiron at the start of this new year. So just be aware if you're not sure, despite Chiron going direct in your sign on the 2nd, it started its retrograde in July last year. If you're not sure, one of the things you shouldn't do is bluff. I don't think it will help you. So for example, if you have an important interview or you do an application, or that Capricornian energy, if there is something you're not quite so sure of course we can all fake it until we make it, but I think there will be times when if you're more authentically yourself, it will actually convey a better signal than trying too hard. But we have 4 Cazimis this month, the 6th, the 9th, the 21st and the 23rd, and the one on the 6th is Venus. Don't underestimate just how much your people skills can be important to progress. So whether you're having an interview or doing a presentation, don't underestimate your talent for that. And also Mars meets exactly with the Sun on the 9th. So that's very, very potent in Capricorn. And if something has felt frustrating for the first week of the new year, that's going to give you a mighty sense of passion and determination and grit to overcome any obstacles and push forwards with a great deal of conviction, and that can be very impressive to people. One of the things about Capricorn energy that is very positive is that it's so tenacious. It doesn't give up. It keeps chipping away even when things don't go exactly to plan. But the full moon that we have on the 3rd does ask you to stay in touch with your emotions, and in fact Jupiter being in your 4th house through to the end of June, that's going to be a theme that you need to adhere to, particularly with Jupiter initially in that square with Chiron and in a retrograde. So if you are feeling a bit unsure, or the environment that you work in isn't really working for you, it would be entirely understandable. But what I feel that you will find as we get to the new moon in Capricorn on the 18th, whatever ambitions you've got, I feel can be amplified in a positive way by doing solid research, that's Saturn in the 12th house, being conscious of where you can be more progressive, Uranus in house 2, because as we get to that new moon on the 18th, a big push again could see the door of opportunity spring open. But soon after, the Sun on the 20th moves to Aquarius, followed by Mercury to come into the third Cazimi on the 21st. Your ideas can just become so much quicker. Your contacts book will be very important to you in the last 10 days of this month. Now, Neptune returning to your sign, I agree, can be a delicate thing because of the watery nature, the aquatic nature of Neptune, the modern ruler of Pisces, applying to you, a hot, arid fire sign. And that's why we had those heat waves, I feel. But on the 23rd, the Cazimi between the Sun and Pluto in Aquarius is probably the most key moment of the month. Because Pluto, in a way, can deconstruct, but it also can reconstruct the phoenix. And what can change for you, maybe later this month, it could be about business alliances and relationships, could be about your long-term plan, it may be about some of your friendships at a social level, changes in the air. Some things might go, some things may need to be released, and when that happens we can be fearful because those things may have served a purpose. But if you really go with it, the latter part of this month has loads of green flags and lots of cheering you on, lots of support, but it is important that you're open to collaboration. You're very much an initiator, and that thrust, energy, excitement and drama that you bring to situations is why people can often really like you. But at times, when we work closely with others, we can share different attributes and qualities, and that's what you're being asked to do towards the end of this month. So that if there is a big shift around your work, come in with all that Capricornian energy, something you have done for a long time has changed because of technology, restructuring, a company or an organization has relocated, or you're working for yourself. It's all moving at such a pace for all of us who of any of us can completely keep up with it. It's breathtaking. But I think if you can tap into that part of you that can be able to see trends very quickly and then have the confidence to take action, I think that's the most exciting part of your nature, and that can shine out brightly as you get to the end of this month. So I think it is a month when you can be optimistic, you can work your way towards goals and ambitions. You do need to stay in touch with your vulnerabilities and sensitivities. Jupiter opposite the Sun, Jupiter square Chiron, Jupiter opposite Mars, which is around the 8th. Impatience won't serve you well at that time, and be philosophical. If some things are making way, or some things have made way over the last couple of years, and you have been slowly but surely winding down something that used to be very important, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a relationship, whether it is how you earned your living, but a fresh, bright new future is being manifested for you later this month if you can go with the flow. All the best, Aries, and thank you so much for joining me. From Taurus, your in-depth monthly forecast for January 2026. I'm going to share some of the standout themes of the month to begin with, then on screen the event chart as the new year dawns. That provides an influential backdrop for the whole of January. I'll then go through all the influences in detail, frame by frame, which you can relate to in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell, and a very warm welcome. All your views, comments, likes and interactions are truly appreciated. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, I have shared that over 50% of people who regularly watch these videos are not subscribers. If that's you, please do so now. Please also click or tap the bell notification symbol and help the channel to continue to thrive. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 video, please see the link beneath this one. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code ASTRO26, you'll get 50% off. Now, your sign is ruled by Venus, and Venus is going to be incredibly influential right throughout this month. But particularly if you make a note of the 6th of January, when she is in a cazimi with the Sun, totally unified, but also on the 8th, she's in a wonderfully intense but passionate embrace with Mars. So that's intriguing. As ever, we do have 2 lunations. The first, the full moon, is early on the 3rd, but just before that a very tender change goes on when Chiron, which has been retracing its steps since July, goes direct in a very sensitive part of your scope. That's truly significant, which I will share. Now, at the very beginning of January, there's a sense of an anticipation about broadening your horizons, travel, movement, some kind of breaking free of a situation which has held you back for too long. But as the month goes on, it's going to become much more about your connection to the wider world. And that really brings your professional situation sharply into focus. So on the screen now, you can see the event chart, and there's Venus very close to the Sun. Now, in traditional astrology, they would say that that's combust, therefore the Sun is overpowering the energy of Venus. Modern astrology would say that's a conjunction, which becomes exact on the 6th, as I mentioned before. But I think that's very, very strong, because if you think about it, the charm, the sultry charm that you possess, is amplified by the enthusiasm that the Sun in the 9th house brings, because at each time as you enter into a new year, the Sun is in your sister sign of Capricorn. Earth energy wants to see tangible outcomes, but the 9th house can be about higher education, it can be about movement, and it can be about liberation. And because Mars is in the mix as well, and Mars and Venus are going to be very close to the Sun through the first 2/3 of this month, I feel that if you have been finding it a little bit difficult to find that extra bit of drive to push through on something that does represent a big shift in your situation, you're much more likely to find it as 2026 begins. But we also need to be mindful of Mercury. Mercury is about communication, but it also can be about business. And for you, it's in the part of your situation to do with shared finances or long-term planning. And that's squaring off with Neptune and Saturn at the start of this new year. And they're in the part of your chart to do with your future planning, your highest hopes, and also your friendships. If there are some alliances which aren't working quite as well as you would like, I think that cluster of energy in the sign of Capricorn is really pushing you to get in touch with the part of your nature that needs to be a free spirit. And if we think about it, over the last 7 years, Uranus has pushed you to experiment and do things that in the past you may not have done. And before that, from 2008 through to November 2014, Pluto was also shifting a lot of things in your life. And even though you do have a reputation for liking continuity and stability, I think this chart is saying to me, it's time to bring in new and fresh approaches, not just in January, but potentially throughout the year. So that's really the big picture. You also have the moon in the 2nd house of your situation, which can be about foundations, your values, everyday money, but is in a very strong link with Pluto at the start of the year, and that's in your sector of success. So if things feel right that you're trying different and where you're going to be more experimental, I would say that's a strong prompt to follow your instincts and really push forwards. Now, I mentioned in my introduction that there is going to be some very important changes at the start of the month. And one of them, ironically, is that Mercury leaves that 8th house later on the 1st and arrives to join with the other 3 players in Capricorn. If there is something that needs some thinking about, planning, or perhaps using technology to work with, Mercury moving into the 9th house will just spark you up, and it won't immediately escape from the check-in energy of Saturn and Neptune, but sure enough, as the month goes on, it is going to give you a chance to think about things in a fresh way, make connections to people outside your normal situation, and that knowledge and information you glean can be very valuable to you. But the other influence that's very powerful early on is that Chiron, the so-called wounded healer, which has been working its way through a very tender part of your chart since the early part of 2019, has been in retrograde since July for 5 months, which is an annual event, rewound 5 degrees. If there have been times when you've been thinking very, very carefully about the more psychological, emotional, or spiritual dimension of your life, it wouldn't be a surprise. But I think all this energy gushing into Capricorn can put you in a much more progressive frame of mind, and Chiron going direct will help. Now on the 3rd we have the full moon in Cancer. For you that's house 3, how we think, quick connections, can be short journeys, our relationships with people in our everyday world, and even siblings. But 3rd house energy, because it's speedy, in an opposition with the 9th house energy, which is about the big picture, more philosophical, it may mean over the following 2 weeks there's going to be some intense discussions. And because the moon goes opposite Mars, which is very close to the position of the sun in Capricorn, don't jump to any conclusions. There may be something you encounter where you feel resistance, or someone doesn't seem to be very clear in what they're saying, and it could see you get quite exasperated. Try to keep an even keel. So the information you initially hear may require sifting and thinking through, but don't get too caught up in other people's agendas. Now as the month goes on, we are going to see a glorious set of 4 Cazimis, and the first on the 6th involves your ruler Venus. Now that's when the sun and the other planetary player are totally unified, and the energy, the radiance, the magnificence of the sun amplifies the brilliance of the other planet. Don't underestimate how attractive and alluring you can be to others, particularly if you've got something to say, an idea, a philosophy to share, or if you're travelling somewhere, you'll be able to immerse yourself in the culture, the food, and the local customs in a very enriching way. But it could lead to a spark of attraction to someone who's further afield from you, or who's different from you in some kind of way. And things can get even hotter on that score when on the 8th, Venus and Mars forge a very intense conjunction themselves. Now on the 9th, it's Mars's turn to go into the Cazimi with the Sun. Now the Sun here is interesting because Mars in Capricorn is exalted and therefore possesses extra confidence, which balances the more cautionary energy of the sign of Capricorn. And you may find that if you have been a little bit unsure whether you should really go for it, whether you should twist or stick, if you're up for twisting, the extra confidence that this combination can give you can be awesome. But just know, right through those first 3 weeks of this new year, the combination of the Sun, Venus and Mars could see you having some very interesting and intriguing conversations, particularly if you are someone who tells or teaches or trains people in some way. You can be very much in vogue. People can be drawn to your message, not just the content of your message, but the tone of the way you deliver it. And Taurus people have a wonderful way of sharing messages. Your throat gives you a certain sensual charm that no other zodiac sign can match. So just know that that's going to be turned up brightly if you are wanting to connect, educate, move around. Your vibe is really going to be flamboyant, and that's exciting. Now, if you can't get away from it all because you have young kids or a busy work schedule which is a bit more confining, there may be other things that you can do early in this month which can bring a sense of change and excitement to your world. Now, one of the things you may consider is learning a foreign language. It could be how to read music, to play an instrument. It may be go into an adult evening class and engage in a brand new hobby which really can open up your world in an exciting way. But as those energies in the sign of Capricorn make progress, they actually come into a very positive alliance with Saturn and Neptune. And if you recall, when Mars, followed by the Sun and then Venus, all moved into the sign of Capricorn, they all went through a period of challenge. But you can shrug that off as this month goes by, because they're all going to move into a very solid connection to Saturn, Neptune and Uranus. And if there are friends that you are aligning to, that you have similar credo, you enjoy getting together with, doing things more spontaneously with, those relationships can get a lot stronger. So I think looking at things overall, for a sign that has a real appreciation of the continuities of life, you could find yourself bolder, a bit more thrusting and more daring as this month goes on, and that can really give you a true spring in your step. Now, by the 18th we have the new moon, and it's a new moon that has Mercury and Mars very close together. Your message can be amplified even more, and you can share your ideas with absolute conviction and confidence, and people will become much more aware of what you have to offer. But the 20th sees the Sun and Mercury step into the sign of Aquarius, and that is for you the sector of success, where Pluto is, and they're going to be meeting first of all together exactly on the 21st in a Mercury cazimi, and then we have a Pluto cazimi on the 23rd as Mars moves into Aquarius too. So some of the things that you could be yearning for early on in this month, Taurus, may not necessarily just be to do with travelling for fun, social or enjoyment reasons. It could be to do with your professional world. And if you are craving something that's more challenging, the last 10 days of this month really give you an awesome opportunity to up your vibration, but also your profile. And if you do want to gain more followers, impress an important colleague or line manager or boss or potentially contractor or so on by doing a very powerful presentation, your chances of doing that are enhanced massively towards the end of January. But the key to this is having the confidence to try something different, to break free of what has perhaps been quite regular and set and formulaic for you, and have a little bit of belief that a change can be as good as a rest. But then if you do want to just be much more self-assured when it comes to your message, your ideas, your self-worth, and taking a leadership role, I think that's entirely possible for you as this month draws to a close. A time when Neptune will return back to the sign of Aries. Now he returns. Now that's intriguing because it's going to be followed by Saturn on the 14th of February, and the 12th house is for you an echo of that Chiron energy, that more inner vibration. So that's saying to you, Neptune, make sure you listen to your inner voice. It won't let you down, even if you are trying some ambitious and thrusting and daring moves this month. But certainly as the month comes to a close, know that if you are wanting to garner much more acclaim, recognition and success, you really have the most fantastic celestial opportunity, to be honest, that I can remember for you for a very long time indeed. Wishing you all the best for January. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code Astro26, you'll get 50% off. All the best and goodbye. Welcome Gemini to your in-depth monthly forecast for January 2026. I'm going to share some standout details for you to begin with, to look out for. Then on screen, your event chart right at the beginning of the year and provides an influential backdrop for the whole of the month. I'll then go through all the influences in detail, frame by frame, which you can relate to in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. A very warm welcome. All your views, interactions, comments and likes are truly appreciated. I have shared that over 50% of people who regularly watch this channel are not subscribers. If that's you, please help it to continue to thrive in the new year and do so now. Please also click or tap the bell notification symbol. If you've yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive Gemini forecast, please see the link beneath this video. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code Astro26, you'll get 50% off. Your ruler is Mercury, and Mercury starts this year, Gemini, for the 3rd year in succession in a zodiac sign where it is detrimented Sagittarius, and that's opposite to your sign, so your sector of relationships, and it is squaring off with Saturn and Neptune as we come into the new year, although Mercury quickly speeds up and moves into the sign of Capricorn later on the 1st. What's the significance of that? Because I think it can be telling for you, not just in January, but throughout the whole of the new year. But also, as we go through this month, your ruler Mercury is going to be very, very powerfully in the mix. In fact, we're going to have a cazimi. That's when the Sun and Mercury are absolutely side by side. It's a superior conjunction which adds extra luster, and it occurs on the 21st of January, and I can't wait to tell you about it. But there's a lot of intense energy early on in the month, not necessarily in a bad way, but that points towards some transformations. Later on in January, it's much more about being freedom loving and perhaps doing some new, fresh and more spontaneous things, very much up your personal street. So on the screen now I'm sharing your event chart, and you can see we have a cluster of energy in the sign of Capricorn. The Sun is always in Capricorn at the turn of the year, which can be about shared resources, business, investment, pensions, saving, inheritances, all those kind of things. But you can see that we have Venus and Mars either side of the Sun. Now they're both going to be forging exact conjunctions, a cazimi with the Sun too. So that's really intriguing. What does it mean for you? Well, the 8th house without Venus and Mars would be a bit drier. It would be a bit more psychological. I think because Mars in the 8th house is very much about desire and potentially gratification through the echo of the 8th house for Scorpio, and Venus in the sign of Scorpio is detrimented, it suggests there could be some very psychological interactions around close relationships. But equally, if you're footloose and fancy free, that epic alliance of those three suggests you're going to be giving out a very potent energy, and that can draw someone very special to you, even though it is early in the year. Now the position of the moon is in your sign, which in a way gives you extra confidence to be in touch with what you want as an individual. But the moon in Gemini in a technical sense is not its best location, because the moon's about feelings and your sign is more about being rational. It's an air sign. It's about analysis. It's about quick communications. But it is forging a powerful link to Pluto. So don't underestimate the power of your message this month. And And if there is something you want to do that's more entrepreneurial, that 8th house energy suggests your desire to make it happen and work is going to be very strong. But if you're in a close relationship, or you'd like to be in a close relationship, there could be at times some very, very potent interactions between you and yours. At times, very closely intimate. At other times, perhaps there can be some challenges, but you can grow through those challenges too. So let's explore the influences for this month for you in a little more detail. As I mentioned before, Mercury does start the month in Sagittarius. Now, Sagittarius is a sign that's very much to do with the big picture. But for you, the 7th house energy of Mercury is asking you to sharpen up your listening skills. But that may be a little bit difficult because of the relationship between Mercury, Saturn and Neptune, because they're in the part of your chart to do with authority. Now, it's possible that you're needing to work with someone who could be a bit changeable or a bit oblique in terms of the instructions they're giving you, or maybe quite demanding, micromanaging you, not giving you much encouragement. So that scenario could play out. Or it may be that it's you that needs to work at understanding how your message is received by other people that you come into contact with. And your ambitions are very much to the fore this month. And to be honest, by the time of the new moon on the 18th, something that you'd like to bring to pass financially could really break through. Or it may be a new job or a proposal that you pitch that does finally receive the acclaim that you want. But patience around the communicational cycle is going to be very important, because I think throughout 2026, not everyone's going to understand your message as you want them to, or you may encounter people who seem to block or slow you down when your nature is to go much quicker because you are just so brilliantly mercurial, of course. But on the 1st, later in the day, Mercury is going to be moving, and it ingresses into Capricorn, joining up with the other 3 players. Now, Mercury loves being in Capricorn because Capricorn is the sign of business, and Mercury can be the merchant. So if you're a marketeer or you're wanting to pitch that idea, Mercury certainly can sharpen things up for you, for sure. Also, I feel that Mercury in the 8th house will help you to don your celestial detective's mat, turn up your collar, dive deep if there's information you need to quarry out. So your powers of analysis can be really heightened. But you know, the 8th house doesn't have to be about deeply passionate romantic relationships or long-term finance. It can be about deep spiritual transformation. It's where we may find ourselves evolving, letting go of layers of ourselves that no longer serve our greater good. So if you do find yourself through the first 2/3 of this month thinking carefully about your values, what's important to you, it wouldn't be a surprise. Now, Chiron, the so-called wounded healer, has been retracing his steps over the last 5 months in the part of your chart to do with your higher values, your connections and friendships. And it's possible there may have been some sensitivities that have been exposed there. Now, he's going direct on the 2nd, but we also have a full moon on the 3rd in the home sign of the moon of Cancer. So, of course, the moon, very comfortable in Cancer, but for you, that's where you're connecting to your values and your need for physical security. But the opposition with the Sun, but particularly Mars, brings a much greater sense of intensity to bear. And if you're seeing a situation perhaps around shared finances very differently to someone else, over the next 2 weeks there could be some heated discussions. But I do say could, because there are various scenarios that can play out. I think one of the things with the moon opposite Mars, it can create some polarized energy. 1 minute we can feel quite up, the next quite sensitive. It could mean that we're more brusque or impatient around tender issues. So just be aware, with Mercury having been challenged right at the start of the month by Saturn and Neptune, not to rush important communications. But what we are going to see by the 6th is a beautiful conjunction between Venus and the Sun. If you are waiting for some good news, perhaps some paperwork, a letter, perhaps linked to some kind of dividend or payout, the news can be very good. You could also gain from someone else's generosity at this point in the month, because Venus and Mars come together in exact conjunction on the 8th. And to be honest, your personal magnetism is going to be so strong at this point. If there is someone that you're finding almost irresistible and just magnetically pulled towards them, or they seem magnetically drawn towards you, this will reach a high point at this stage of January. But then it's Mars and the Sun that come together on the 9th in a cazimi. What I feel with that is that if there's something you desire, whatever it is you desire, whether it's something you see in the winter sales that proves irresistible, whether it is a high ticket item such as a new vehicle, whether it's to do with a property matter, or whether it is someone that's come up on your celestial radar that does seem very, very lovely indeed, Mars and the Sun together can give you such a lot of thrust. So if there is something you really want, if you set your sights on it, the chances are you could get it. But just be aware, if you're too impulsive too quickly, it may be something you could live to regret, and you could have a case of buyer's remorse. So just be conscious of that. It's not a given by any means at all. Now on the 18th, we do have the new moon in the sign of Capricorn. And that transformation that's been going on, coming to terms with a cycle that's closed, but knowing that from that, like a phoenix, new beginnings can come, or just understanding whether the attraction you've had, perhaps with someone you met over the festivities, can actually turn into something beyond the intimate dimension. Or it could be that financial or business matter, you're going to find out by the new moon how that's developing. But also, if you want to energize it more, you can certainly do so, because it's a new moon that forges a fantastic link with Mars and Mercury. So that gives you a lot of quick and dynamic and assertive energy, but it's also linking fabulously to Saturn, Neptune and Uranus. And Uranus is, to be honest, in a tricky part of your chart again through to the 26th of April, but maybe something to do with your past can come back to you in a providential way. But then on the 20th, both the Sun and your ruler Mercury make their way into your sister air sign of Aquarius. And in fact, on the 21st, they're celebrating the third cazimi of the month and the year. What a fabulous relationship that is, because Mercury rules the second decan of the sign of Aquarius, the second 10 degrees. And I also feel, as I mentioned in my preamble, that Mercury is accidentally exalted in Aquarius, and here it's making you think more about opening up your world. So all the intensity which has been so prevalent really since just before Christmas won't necessarily completely dissipate, but you could be more in the mood to liberate yourself from it. That may mean by going somewhere more spontaneously. It may mean about checking out a course of higher education. If you have been considering the aforementioned new vehicle, that can come very much into your thinking in the last 10 days of this month. So could some kind of venture or travel plan. And if it is somewhere that's different and fresh and highly stimulating, I think it could be very good for you indeed, because the thrust of Mars is going to be joining with the Sun and Mercury, and that's on the 23rd. But we also have the Sun and Pluto in your 9th house full time since November 2024. So all of this has given you a huge desire to shake things up. There's a part of your nature that's innately restless. You can be so quick to see things, and that speed and agility and ability to flex into different opportunities is really something that's very special to Gemini people. But what you can add to that later in the month is a bit more of a philosophical dimension, or seeing the big picture, slowing things down a little bit, but downloading lots of different knowledge and information can inform you in a fantastically enriching way. So even if you are someone who has worked extremely hard on a particular goal or target over quite a period of time, you may find yourself much more in the mood to pivot and target some new experiences as January comes to a close. Now, Neptune, the planet of dreams, which has been quite challenging at times since 2012, maybe there has been moments when you have hired your profile, particularly if you work in any kind of creative or imaginative dimension, a carer, or perhaps in the healing arts, like being a psychic. It's possible since 2012 you've really flourished. But over the last couple of years, I think there's been some questions and not necessarily all the answers. Neptune moving into the 11th house is going to help you a lot. And it's going to be joined by Saturn on the 14th of February. And I think that 10th house energy, which has been more challenging, your professional load has been heavy, or perhaps the needs of others has been a little bit more testing. I think you're going to be in the mood to not just try new experiences with all that Aquarius energy, but also connect to new people. So as this month comes to a close, there really is a new epoch developing for you. But I think it is quite an extraordinary set of influences, and each one of those exact hits is so powerful. It's pushing you in a way to take action when in the past ideas or people or situations may have intrigued you, but then you've not quite found enough juice of emotion to really find a spark to make the move. I think January is going to be very different in that regard and almost irresistible in so many ways. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code ASTRO26, you'll get 50% off. All the best and goodbye. Come Cancer to your in-depth monthly forecast for January 2026 for your ascendant, sun or the moon. I'm going to share with you some standout themes of the month to begin with, then on screen the event chart as we come into the new month and year. That provides an influential backdrop for the whole of January. I'll then go through each of the influences in detail. It's really exciting for you. Please stay with me for that. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, we have found that over 50% of people who regularly watch my videos are not subscribers. So if you do, please help the channel to continue to thrive, and your views, interactions, comments and likes are truly appreciated. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code ASTRO26, you'll get 50% off. As we come into this new year, Cancer, there is a cluster of energy in your opposite sign. Well, what makes that particularly significant this year is that Venus is so close to the Sun. In fact, they're coming into a glorious and really quite rare for this time of the year conjunction, a cazimi on the 6th. We also have Mars in the mix. In fact, for the first 2/3 of January, your relationship sector absolutely sizzles with possibilities. I can't wait to share that with you. But of course, we do have a full moon in your sign on the 3rd. What's the significance of that? We have a new moon, however, which manifests on the 18th, and that too is particularly exciting this year. But later in the month, there's a big shift. It's much more transformational. It can be about money, shared finances and so on, but also it can be about where you wanting to evolve in your life and release what's no longer serving you. So all of that to come, but on the screen now is your event chart at the beginning of January. And there's Venus, the planet of relating, but also of money, so very close to the Sun. But having Venus in the 7th house is significant because that's an echo of its Libran rulership, which is very much to do with harmony. And I feel that the year ahead can bring some really intriguing possibilities around all sorts of relationships. It doesn't have to be just in a romantic context. But being so close to the Sun and them coming into an exact conjunction on the 6th, known as a cazimi, means the Sun is going to amplify the magic of Venus. So it's an encouragement in some ways to celebrate the things we have in common, not to be quite so focused on what's not quite working. But with Mars in the mix at the start of the year, very close to the Sun as well, if you need to be assertive, put your foot down a little bit about your boundaries, you can do so, but use the grace of Venus to express your message with a degree of subtlety but also authority. So that's really exciting. But you can also see that Mercury is just at the end of its journey through Sagittarius, a sign that it's not that comfortable in, and it is clashing with the dreamy drifting energies of Neptune. If there's something around the practicalities of your life that you're not really enjoying, perhaps it's a daily routine that's rather repetitive, not very inspiring, throughout 2026, I think what you could crave for is some kind of greater contact that has a meaning to it. So roles that aren't very exciting or engaging or don't enable your soul to really express itself could make way as this year goes on, and that can be a feature of the early part of the new year. But you can also see the moon, the other luminary from the Sun, is in the 12th house of your chart, and that's suggesting that being aware of your more psychological dimension and being a water sign, it's not something you're unaccustomed to, is going to be quite a theme throughout this year. And if you look at the position of Pluto, the Moon and Pluto are well aligned, but when it comes to deep connections, I think they really have to feel right. But on the 1st, later in the day, Mercury moves forwards, joining up with those three players in the sign of Capricorn. So we have a lovely posse, a stellium of energy in your sector of relating. And whereas Mercury's connection to Neptune and Saturn may have created some confusion or perhaps a feeling of uncertainty, Mercury moving into your 7th house encourages you to sharpen up your listening skills as January goes on. But on the 2nd, Chiron, the so-called wounded healer, ends a 5-month retrograde that began in July. Now Chiron is an intriguing influence. It can be a superpower, but it can also be where our vulnerabilities show up. And for you, it's been in the part of your chart in that retrograde to do with your connection to the wider world. And during its occupation in Aries, we've also had first Neptune and then Saturn go briefly into the sign of Aquarius. So if you did experience over the last 6 months or so some challenges around your work, that may have been amplified by the sensitivity of Chiron retrograde. So going direct is helpful to you, but Chiron does forge a square as you come into this new year with Jupiter in your sign. So if there is something you're uncertain about, one of the things I'd encourage you not to do is try to gloss it over. By saying to yourself, I must or I will be uber self-confident, uber enthusiastic, is not likely to solve the issue. So just be aware, if you're not enjoying some kind of functional part of your connection to the world or that daily routine, that may be what needs to change at times this year. But by the 3rd, we have that full moon in your zodiac sign. Why this is significant, the moon, of course, rules your zodiac sign. So It's a full moon that feels in some ways very comfortable to you. It's making you much more conscious of your immediate needs, your agency. But on the other side of the heavens, very close to the sun, along with Venus, is Mars still. And the moon opposite Mars can be a turbulent, intense opposition. If there is a relationship where you don't feel you're heard or seen or respected, and no amount of listening on your part or diplomacy from Mercury and Venus is making much of a difference, you may find over the next couple of weeks you have to put your foot down. So as much as that Capricornian stellium at the start of this year, and also complemented by Mercury later on the 1st, suggests there can be some exciting developments around relationships. There could also be some ties that are ripe to change. It doesn't have to be terminal, but perhaps what this particular full moon is asking you to do is overcome a part of your nature which can be reluctant to have confrontation. So if there are challenges, part of your nature can be to retreat, withdraw, not have a direct challenge. And I feel that Mars in a way is encouraging you to be a bit bolder and more outspoken. You can still retain your equilibrium with Venus's help with the wonderful cazimi, which occurs on the 6th. Then Venus and Mars connect perfectly on the 8th. If there is someone who's showing an interest in you, this is going to give you such an enormous amount of extra radiance in terms of all sorts of connections. And then on the 9th, it's the Sun's turn to connect to Mars. Now that's significant because Mars loves being in Capricorn. It's known as being exalted. But we do have a clash between the two exalted players of Jupiter and Mars at this part of the month. It's not a time to be overconfident. So even if you are setting a boundary, letting someone know what you will or won't do, I wouldn't push too hard. One of the things that I think your chart tells me for January, but also for 26, is to try to keep a level of goodwill. So even if it is just civility, if a relationship is ending, but perhaps there's possessions to sort out, maybe there's child or pet care, those things will work best if you do say how you feel, but you also keep the lines of communication open. Because if you just completely withdraw, yes, it may protect you, but it doesn't really resolve the issue in an active way. Now we are going to see, as the month goes on, a gathering of energy moving towards the sign of Capricorn, but we have the 4th successive new moon at 28 degrees. The symmetry is just stunning, and that occurs on the 18th of the month, and it's also very close to Mars and Mercury in your opposite sign. So you may find yourself just actually quite enjoying this extra dimension of your nature, being a bit surer about where you will say no, whether it's in terms of demands at work or in a partnership, a friendship within the family. But Venus is there supporting you at this stage of the month in a very helpful way. But when Mars, followed by the Sun, followed by Venus, all went into your 7th house, they all clashed with Saturn and Neptune. Now, with beautiful symmetry, they all forge a lovely relationship to them. And they also link beautifully to Uranus in your sector of connections around friendships, your network, but also your long-term plan. And through to the end of April, Uranus is reminding you of what's important to you in terms of your values. So people that you can connect to, that really share your values, that you have a simpatico, can become very important players throughout the first 2/3 of this month. But then on the 20th, the Sun along with Mercury make their way for you into the deep transformational part of your chart, the 8th house. Now they're going to come into a cazimi on the 21st. Mercury cazimis are fabulous. This one's a superior cazimi because Mercury's not in retrograde, and it's a chance to really use an opportunity to dive deep at the more psychological side of your nature if you're wanting to evolve through personal development, through any kind of rituals. If it is a time to think carefully about shared finances or how you use the resources you've got, you can do so very skillfully in the last 10 days of this month. In a more pragmatic and practical way, with Mars playing catch up with the Sun and Mercury, and also Venus, which moved on the 17th into Aquarius, I think if there has been a connection with someone and you've been exploring it, you're going to find out in the last part of this month whether this can become very deep and very invested, even devoted, or if you're not really feeling it, it could be a time when you want to start closing some doors. But because the planets are encouraging you to engage and not withdraw, this latter part of the month could mean that if you are releasing something and letting it go, at least you can say, I tried my hardest to engage, rather than when you're feeling a challenge, the protectiveness that you can sometimes deploy sees you close down any connection. That steals the oxygen. If you don't do that, but then you feel you still need to move on, well, you can reassure yourself that you've done everything possible to try to create an exit which is as gracious and fair as possible. Because the 7th house, where all that energy is early in the month, is about equilibrium. Keeping things in balance and being fair is actually going to lift you spiritually. But later in the month, there could be some very practical decisions you're thinking around in terms of investments, shares, savings, property, a business venture or entrepreneurship. It may be that inner change that you're thinking about, because what we're going to see is the 4th gazimi of the year on the 23rd, when the Sun applies to Pluto. And you may have found since the end of November 2024 that some deep changes have been going on in your situation, and those can be echoed again at the end of this month. But change is something that is fundamentally part of life, and it is something that we can sometimes be challenged by, because 8th house energy can be where we're most attached. It can be where we're a bit perhaps obsessive. It can be about addiction in some ways. It may be a lifestyle choice. It could be being too caught up with a possession, a financial aspiration. It may be someone that we're finding so dazzling and mesmeric that we can't stop thinking about them, but that's not necessarily good for our soul. So towards the end of this month, therefore, I feel you can shake it all out and use your inimitable emotional insights to really guide you about what you're going to dive deeper into and be more profoundly associated with, and what you might want to evolve and release and let go. It's been a real pleasure being with you. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code ASTRO26, you'll get 50% off. All the best and goodbye. Come Leo, to your in-depth monthly forecast for January 2026. I'm going to share with you first of all some of the big themes of the month, then on screen your event chart right at the start of January, which always provides an influential backdrop for the following month. I'll then go through each of the influences in detail to give you a clear picture of what's going to unfold, which you can relate to in terms of your ascendant, sun or moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell, and a very warm welcome. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, we have found that 50% of people who regularly watch my videos are not subscribers. Please do so now and help the channel to continue to thrive. If you have already subscribed, all your views, interactions and comments are truly appreciated. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code ASTRO26, you'll get 50% off. As we come into this month, as ever, the start of each year, the sun is in the part of your chart very much to do with practicalities. So if you're setting those New Year's resolutions, perhaps Leo people have the most intent. What's going to burnish those this year is that Mars, the planet of drive and action, is very close to the sun as you break into the new dawn, and that can give you an extra sense of urgency. So if you have been thinking about going from a born again couch potato to a born again Olympian, the portents are very good indeed. But also Venus is in the mix, and Venus is about relating but also about money. So I think as you come into this new year, you're perhaps wanting to get a little bit more organized, and that doesn't sound very sexy, but be assured as the month goes on, your relationship sector can be lit up in the most magical of ways that can bring huge shifts and huge exciting shifts for you. So please stay with me for that. So on the screen now, Leo, is your event chart at the start of the year. The big takeouts is that the planets in the sign of Capricorn, the Sun's always in this location as I mentioned, but also Mars, the planet of action, gives a lot of thrust if you are wanting to change your job, or if your daily routines have become a little bit too predictable. I think what you're wanting to introduce into the mix is more passion and perhaps more creativity, which is coming from Venus. So if you're in a role which may be very worthy, it may pay the bills, but it doesn't really give you that sense of purposefulness in a wider way, you could think again, not just in January, but throughout 2026. But the moon, very important in terms of our emotional considerations, is actually very friendly at the start of this year and forging an important contact with Pluto in your sector of relationships. I think a friend or a group of people are set to become very significant over the next year, and it could be people who in the past may not necessarily have been your cup of tea, but you have been finding over the last couple of years that there's been some complexities, I feel, around some close alliances, involvements, and perhaps even around business or financial matters. And that energy has come from Neptune and Saturn principally, and at the very start of this year, that more creative energy that Venus is asking you to engage with is amplified by Mercury in your fellow fire sign of Sagittarius. But that's checked off by Neptune and also Saturn. Now Mercury ironically moves later on the 1st of January into Capricorn, where it actually really likes to be. It's very crisp there, it analyses things in a very sharp way. But initially, if you are wanting to show more flamboyance in your approach, you need to think, is it going to be financially workable because of that square with Neptune? Or is it in a romantic or close involvement, are you feeling in some ways kind of hemmed in? So that energy could be something that does show itself throughout 26 as well. If you've yet to watch your deep dive for the year ahead, please see the link beneath this video where you can do so. But we also have Chiron, which is very much to do with our wound, has been in the part of your situation to do with knowledge over the last about 6 years. And since July has been retracing its steps. It starts the new year in a square with Jupiter. If you do feel that there's a gap in the knowledge that you have academically, professionally, or even in terms of your own personal insights, I think that square between Chiron and Jupiter at the start of this year is also very intriguing too, and I think can be an area of growth for you. But those practicalities are definitely complemented by the arrival of Mercury. But then we have a full moon on the 3rd. The moon in the sign of Cancer doesn't really get any better, it rules that sign, but for you it's in the 10th to 12th house where Jupiter is. If you are feeling a bit vulnerable in your work situation, for example, if there are people that don't really chime with, or you're not quite sure where you stand, the fact that the moon is in an opposition with Mars as well can draw up and bring into the open some very unsettling energies. And it may be over the following 2 weeks that if you're not enjoying it, you really will start to actively look for alternatives. The other part of what you may need to balance on that full moon is making sure that wherever you're being most hard-working and really disciplined in terms of keeping things very well structured, neat and tidy, that's all laudable, but is it chiming with your inner world? So if you're not really feeling a sense of satisfaction, that full moon is going to remind you of a need to make some changes so that you can evolve onwards. But on the 6th, the Sun and Venus come into an exact conjunction known as a cazimi. The Sun amplifies the energy of Venus. Venus in Capricorn is steady, it's cautious, it's realistic. So it's not as romantic, it's not inclined to make big gestures, but that combination would be excellent if you were having an interview or doing a presentation. I think your sincerity could come across very well, particularly if you can demonstrate that your knowledge can be applied in a way that has some kind of productive or practical outcome, which is very much the earth energy of Capricorn. Then on the 8th, it's Venus and Mars' turn to get together. If there is someone you work with or you encounter in your daily routines, at the gym, in the supermarket, that's been capturing your imagination, you could find yourself thinking about that person a great deal more. Venus and Mars together can give you more desire, but the 6th house could be desire to make something work more efficiently, which isn't something we ordinarily think about in terms of romance. But how about this? If you're the person who does much of the heavy lifting when it comes to the domestic chores, I think that combination is reminding you that you have every right to tell people, whether it's your kids or your partner, look, you need to do your bit as well. But the combination of the diplomacy of Venus and the assertion of Mars can help you make your point in a very sharp way. I mentioned that Mercury joins the cluster of energy in Capricorn on the 1st, later on in the day. If there is something that you want to analyse, it may be to do with what you eat or drink, because when we think about the 6th house, we can think about work, obligations, routines, making things run in a very well ordered way, and we can also think about things like exercise and so on, but do we think so much about diet? And diet is quite a controversial theme, I thought, because of the rise of processed foods, and I think the 6th house can be very much about virtuousness. So this energy at the start of the year is asking you throughout 2026 to consider, I feel, making some small but valuable changes through a gradual evolution. So that may be looking at packets, understanding more what's in the food that you're buying, and where possible, making food from scratch. So that kind of virtue can add extra energy, vibrancy, and physical strength and stamina, and it's something that you can gain from all through the new year if you engage with it. And because of the moon's great link to Pluto at the start of this year, if you're doing it with someone else and you're sharing your experiences and really encouraging each other on, that can also be very valuable too. Now Venus, the planet of relating, moves into a delicious part of your chart on the 17th. There's no better part of Venus's journey than the 7th house in terms of relationships. It loves being in the 2nd house too, in terms of its more Tauran vibe, the enjoyment of good food, good wine and money. But the 7th house is where we can perhaps try to find greater harmony, and sometimes that harmony comes from understanding that the people around us or the world around us is not perfect, and the more we can accept that, the more we can just float along in a more peaceful way. But Venus moving into the 7th house can be really good romantically too. So if you're single, I can assure you the last 10 days of this month can be very exciting indeed. The new moon of the 18th can be a glorious opportunity to really start to see the progress shape up in a more tangible way that you set your sights on as you went into 26, because of the great link to Saturn, very much to do with stability, to Neptune, flare, but also Uranus, very much your connection to the wider world. It's possible for some lines there's going to be a reset around your work over the following month. And if you are open to doing something that's very different, but where you can still work hard in demonstrating your talents in a very thorough way, that's the perfect complement. But also you can find yourself attracted as the month develops on from this point towards connections to others. So for some people you may even think that that work dynamic could play out in terms of a partnership, with Venus having arrived on the 17th in your opposite sign, followed by the Sun on the 20th and Mercury. They come together in the 3rd cazimi of the month on the 21st, followed by Mars on the 23rd, and the Sun and Pluto forge in the 4th cazimi. That relating dynamic becomes very, very strong towards the end of this month. But because Mars is in the mix, as much as Venus can be very much about harmony and diplomacy, Mars can be very much about boundaries, where you want to be more assertive, perhaps even more combative, even more competitive. It doesn't necessarily have to be just about finding a more equitable way of being with people. You need to feel that it's mutual, that it's two-way. And if a relationship isn't working for you so well, the energy of that full moon is going to make you much more conscious of the little details, which sometimes can loom very large if we feel that they're important to us and being disregarded by someone else. So all that Aquarius energy may for you be at one level about increasing your sense of connection, making some positive alliances, perhaps even meeting someone very special. All of that's possible, but in a pre-existing relationship, if you're not really feeling it, you're going to be a lot bolder about saying what you need and what you want. And that can be very good. And it doesn't have to be only around a romance. It could be in the family. It could be with your children, maybe with a colleague. But a good mix of firmness, authority, but also an equitable energy to express how you feel, coming from Venus and Mercury, means that the last part of this month is one of the most exciting periods for you to feel heard, become more seen, but also achieve a greater sense of connection with others by really saying what you need, whether it is in a practical situation or your personal life. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code ASTRO26, you'll get 50% off. All the best and goodbye. Welcome Virgo to your in-depth monthly forecast for January 2026. I'm going to share with you first of all some of the big themes of the month ahead. Then on screen, your event chart at the top of January always provides an influential backdrop for the whole of the month. I'll then go through each of those influences in detail to give you a really clear picture of what you can expect in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. A very warm welcome. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, we have found that over 50% of my regular viewers are not subscribers. Please help us to continue to thrive and do so now. Your views, interactions and likes are all truly appreciated. Now, year 2026 is upon us. If you've yet to watch your deep dive video, please see the link below. So Virgo, as we come into this new year, as ever, the sun is in the very bubbly 5th house of your chart, your sister earth sign of Capricorn. But this year there's an added bonus, because Venus, the planet of charm, but also the planet which is very much to do with values and money, but also relating, is very close to the sun as well, which is beautiful. And alongside them both is Mars, which is very much about thrust. And that combination is going to light up this month for you, but also potentially provide a backdrop for the rest of the year. But your ruler Mercury, although set to join your 5th house, Capricorn, later on the 1st, is actually in a tricky position at the very start of the day, and it's squaring up with Neptune in your sector of relationships. So I think there could be times this month when cross wires are possible in very close interactions. Saturn's also in a square with Mercury too, and it may feel to you that however much you're trying to be positive, dynamic and upbeat, someone's resistant to your charm. But we do of course have 2 lunations as ever, the full moon on the 3rd, but a very constructive and positive new moon on the 18th, which is really exciting and I can't wait to share with you. But the other thing that occurs this month, and it's really rare, is that we have 4 cazemis in January. A cazimi is when the sun and another planetary player absolutely unify. 4 of them, fantastic, and one of them includes your ruler, a Mercury cazimi, and it's also a superior conjunction, so it's a very radiant opportunity. Now later in the month, some of the creativity and fun of the earlier parts of January make way for a much more practical dimension, and you have a gift for understanding that department of life. But over the last couple of years particularly, Pluto has been pushing you to consider diet, exercise, routines and your work, all areas that you're very attuned to, in perhaps a different way. And there is going to be a lot of energy towards the end of January that I need to share with you. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code Astro26, you'll get 50% off. So Virgo, on the screen now is your event chart, and there is your ruler Mercury in the 4th house. The intriguing thing is that Mercury is in Sagittarius at the start of the year for the 3rd year in succession, but Mercury's detrimented in Sagittarius. Why is that? Well, Mercury in your sign is very much about precision and analysis and practicality, and Mercury in Gemini, which it also rules, is very much about the message, about how we communicate, and often very quickly. The sign of Sagittarius is about the big picture. It's not about the details. You can find the details a bit boring, Sagittarius. And for you, the 4th house is very much about emotion, and Mercury and emotion aren't really compatible, because Mercury is more about how we use our thinking and how we use our intellect. So Mercury in Sagittarius in the 4th house suggests that if you're wanting to be a little bit more open about some of your feelings, the clash with Neptune and Saturn in the 7th house of your chart, which is where other people are receiving you, means that someone could be evasive or perhaps not very clear about what they want from you, or maybe Saturn may be someone who's quite cool or disinterested, or in some ways resists whatever you're feeling perhaps you want to share. So if there is something tender that you're feeling at the start of this month and year, just be aware that someone may not be initially receptive. But then later on the first day, Mercury moves into the 5th house. Mercury here moves from being very introspective and into being much cheekier, because Mercury can be a very fun-loving influence, but it also can be a mischief seeker, whether it's expressing your sense of humour or getting extra urgency into some creative ideas you've got. Mercury joining up with Venus, the Sun and Mars is a very lovely thing indeed. And that cluster, particularly early in a year, can see you actually storming into the early parts of this month, perhaps in a much more bubbly way than any other zodiac sign. You do have a reputation for being very conscientious, very much adhere to the aforementioned routines. This is asking you to think about how you can showcase your individual talent, flair and creativity, but also think about how you can have fun. And because Venus and Mars and the Sun all arrived in your 5th house towards the end of last year, if there was someone you encountered over the festivities that you did have a real connection to from a romantic viewpoint, which the 5th house represents, there may be a very positive energy around you and them as you storm into this new year, as long as you feel you can relate to them in a way where they're receiving you in a very empathetic way. So if there isn't that emotional connection, however much you fancy someone, however much fun they are, however much you find them alluring, that could be a little bit of an issue. But certainly if you want to head into this new year, moving on from some of the ideas that you've developed later in 25 and really bringing them to life in the new year, what a cluster of energy. And also on the 2nd, Chiron, very much to do with our vulnerability, which has over the last few years been in the part of your chart to do with very intimate connections. That's been retracing its steps since July. But Chiron starts to go forwards on the 2nd, but it is in a square with Jupiter. If there is someone, Jupiter's in the friendliest part of your scope, very much to do with friendships and your long-term plan, but in a retrograde. But if there is someone in your friendship group that you're finding chips away a little bit at your confidence, I feel that you shouldn't cut them too much slack. One of the things that Mars is going to give you by being in the sign of Capricorn early on in the month, he's going to move into the sign of Aquarius on the 23rd. One of the things that Mars is giving you is a lot more confidence to ask for what you need. And so, you know, if you feel that you have lent into someone else and they're not really respecting that, Mars is like a furnace asking you to have a bit more ego, to be honest. And that brings us to the full moon of the 3rd. For you, it's a full moon which is quite intriguing because it could show up as a kind of crossroads. Maybe you're not feeling so happy in a romantic relationship, and the moon's in the part of your chart to do with your long-term plan, along with Jupiter. But it is in an opposition, not just with the Sun, but also with Mars. If you are feeling constrained in a relationship of any kind, whether it's a friendship or a personal tie, I think you're being asked to embrace ego more. I don't mean ego by being obnoxious, I mean ego by having the confidence to say what you need for you. And if someone's not really encouraging you to be dynamic, individualistic, show your glamour, show your talent and flair, turn your charisma up to max. If someone's resisting that at any level, it's a full moon which is asking you to check out of that relationship. But you can do so with charm, with the Sun and Venus forging a cazimi on the 6th. If you have a date at that time, you know, and Venus and Mars in a conjunction on the 8th, it could be a date that really sizzles. And then Mars in a conjunction with the Sun on the 9th. Again, your sense of attractiveness is really going to be heightened by this. Feel good, strut your stuff, Virgo. Yes, you can be the person who glues life together, often working in roles that require attention to detail, being very reliable, conscientious and so on. This is a month in the early parts of it when you can dazzle if you give yourself permission. And those cazimis with Venus and Mars are certainly a great example of that. We are going to see a developing energy as the month goes on, with Mercury, your ruler, moving forwards and forging very constructive links to Saturn, Neptune, and also to Uranus. And that's intriguing, you know, because Uranus starts this year back in the part of your chart to do with being much more risk-taking, much more freedom and loving and independent, but it is going to move back into your sector of the career from the 26th of April. And I think later in this month, you start to get an insight that if you're not really enjoying a job, if it doesn't allow you to express your talents, that's going to be part of your calculus. Because if you have done a job because it's given you personal satisfaction, because it's helping other people, often the case with Virgos, being that way inclined is very laudable. But I think as the year goes on, you may find you're wanting to be a bit more risk-taking, doing things that really inspire but perhaps also challenge you, and not just being involved in something that's very metronomically predictable. That could be something that the start of this month starts to make you much more conscious is not enough. You're wanting a sense of desire and passion, and that's amplified by the new moon of the 18th, which occurs in Capricorn. But just before that, on the 17th, Venus glides into Aquarius. Venus in Aquarius is an intriguing place for it to be. It can mean that we have unusual connections. It can mean that we have a greater preference for friendships, or friendly connections of all kinds can be amplified. And you may find with Venus's help, if you do have a colleague that you get on well with, you may spend a lot more time with them in the latter part of this month. But that new moon really does push you, Virgo, to have the confidence to step outside what's very familiar. And the word I used before was dazzle. And dazzle you can if you go for it, because your ruler Mercury is in the mix, and so is Mars. And that combination adds thrust to thinking, Mercury, but the 5th house is very much to do with animating talent, pleasure and joy. It may be early in the year, and many of us may hunker down in the northern hemisphere. Perhaps you're in the south. Wherever you are, if you can connect and get out and be with people, it's going to be very valuable, and that new moon is a really enriching one. But then we have the Sun moving into Aquarius, 20th, followed by your ruler the same day. They come into the 3rd cazimi of the month on the 21st, and that's very powerful, because for you, that part of your nature which can be so concentrated and so precise, and understands that it is important to make sure that processes are completed in a way which is efficient but also gives some kind of tangible, workable outcome. You're really going to be crisp at this point of the month. Brilliant for any kind of job, or maybe some changes you might want to make at home. If you're a do-it-yourselfer, you can be inspired towards the end of this month. But the Mars plays catch up with them, and then we have a Pluto cazimi with the Sun, the 4th of the month on the 23rd. And this, interestingly, I think could be one of the key moments of the month, because Pluto may have been pushing you for 11 weeks from March 23, from the 21st of January 24 to early September, and then from November 24. Pluto in Aquarius has just been trying to wake up your consciousness of where you show commitment, where you show application, and where you show conscientiousness. Is it something that you're getting quite the same from that you used to? And all Pluto does is ask a question. Sometimes Pluto will push us towards a change that we're not ready for, and we can't see it. And it actually can be very painful, because Pluto asks us to release something. And because it's about power, if we're not ready to do that, it can make us feel very vulnerable and exposed. But if you have noticed that you've been thinking, well, I have been doing this job for a long time and I really have enjoyed it, but do you know, there are a few things about it which I'm not quite appreciating, or you've evolved outside your work in terms of your interests, your talents, your knowledge, and maybe there's other options you could consider. I think that's really what the Pluto cazimi is drawing your attention to in the latter part of this month. And then we have more connections as the month draws to a close. Mercury and Mars and Pluto, very powerful. If there is someone who's taking you for granted professionally, I think they could be surprised that you are much more assertive about that not being satisfactory. You can be a stickler for detail. I think people can find Virgo energy challenging, a bit brittle, maybe a bit perfectionist, and maybe a bit critical. And someone may push back against that at the end of the month. But always remember that your life force is very much about finding small but important ways to improve things, graduated gains. It's a very powerful part of your nature. And if you're seeing something that does need to evolve, whether it's part of your inner journey or your practical environment or where you work, go with it. You may find yourself considering your diet, your exercise routines, not just your work, in a way that perhaps in the past you haven't. New information can be becoming available to you. It might have been there before, but for whatever reason you may not have quite grappled with it, but you can do as this month draws to a close. So it's a month rich in enthusiasm, joyfulness, playfulness in the first 2/3, but then you can convert some of the lovely ideas that you've been developing early on into something more workable latterly in the month. Very Virgo, but some big shifts are going on in those everyday parts of your situation to do with routines. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code ASTRO26, you'll get 50% off. All the best and goodbye. Welcome Libra to your in-depth monthly forecast for January 2026. I'm going to share with you first of all some of the standout details of the month ahead, then on screen the event chart right at the beginning of January always provides an influential backdrop for the whole month. I'll then go through all the details frame by frame to give you a clear picture of what you can expect in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell and a very warm welcome. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, please do so now. We have found that over 50% of people who regularly watch these videos are not subscribers. It helps the channel to continue to thrive. Please click or tap the bell notification symbol. If you've yet to check out your year 2026 deep dive video, please see the link beneath this video too. Your ruler is Venus, and Venus is right at the heart of things as we go into this new year. Venus is going to be combining with the Sun but also Mars through the first 2/3 of the month of January. But that's in the sign of Capricorn, and for you that's very much to do with your emotional sphere. And if you recall through to November 2014, in the main part since 2008, tiny but influential Pluto had really been pushing and prompting some painful at times changes. So what will Venus and Mars applying into the Sun in the early part of this new year hold in store for you? I'm going to unpack that for you. But later in the month, there's a glittering set of influences that are particularly positive for you. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code ASTRO26, you'll get 50% off. On the screen now is the event chart right at the start of the month, and you can relate to this in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. Now, Venus, there she is, at 9 degrees and 12, very close to the Sun. If you have wanted to move or to refurbish or redecorate your property, I feel that that's going to be a big theme for the year ahead, not just in January. It may also be that there's going to be some changes on the home front, perhaps a new addition, and that also can bring joy. Venus close to the Sun gives your natural elegance and grace a chance to be amplified. Now, the Sun in Capricorn can be more cautious, but with Mars in the mix, that gives you a bit more feist. Because over the last few years, if you have felt that it's been a lot of give and not a lot of get, it wouldn't be a surprise with Saturn and Neptune in the main, in the part of your chart to do with hard work, application and sacrifice. And as we come into this new month, it is true that Mercury, the planet of communication, is in an awkward angle with that duo. So your thinking, in some ways, could feel a little stressed if there's a situation where you do feel that someone's not really taking their share of the burden, and it may be at work as well as much at home. And that's something, as we come into this new month, that's going to be important for you. But later on the 1st of January, Mercury moves out of the sign of Sagittarius, where it's detrimented and clashing with Neptune and Saturn, which can create distortion or a little bit of demotivation. It moves into Capricorn, where it is very businesslike. And because Venus can be about money and Mars can be about desire, if you have felt or wanted to start a business from the comfort of your abode, that also can be a big theme this month. But the arrival of Mercury in the 4th house of your chart can also see you thinking very carefully about some of your more personal strands in your situation. And also with Chiron, the so-called wounded healer, ending his retrograde, which began in July on the 2nd, if some of how you've been feeling has been around relationships, perhaps even relationships with people in the family, it wouldn't be a complete surprise. But your feelings are going to be very close to the surface on the full moon of the 3rd. At home in Cancer, it's an opportunity for you to articulate some of those more personal considerations and thoughts that you have. But someone close to you may not necessarily be very receptive. But because the moon and Mars are in an opposition, just expect over the next 2 weeks that there could be a little bit of turbulence, particularly balancing home, family and emotional needs with your professional demands too. Now we're going to see also early in the month Venus in a cazimi with the Sun, and if you are wanting to make those changes to your abode, or there's someone that you're getting to know, perhaps from a more romantic dimension, but you do feel very comfortable in their space, that tie can really be clarified in a positive way at that point. But Venus and Mars come into a conjunction on the 8th. If there is a situation where you feel you're not being heard, you could be a bit more robust about expressing how you feel, but you can still use your legendary diplomacy as well. Now it's the Sun's turn to combine with Mars, the second cazimi on the 9th. Now that hit in the sign of Capricorn, the combination of the Sun and Mars, can certainly give you a lot of desire if you do want to make physical changes to where you live or move altogether, because Mars brings a sense of urgency and greater thrust. But then, as we have the month developing and all the players move forward in the sign of Capricorn, we're inching towards understanding a lot more what you're wanting in terms of your inner world. But your ruler moves on the 17th into one of the most fantastic parts of its journey through the sky for you personally. Moving into the 5th house of Aquarius shares your air tropicity. That brings a sense of playfulness. You can feel more flirty, more glamorous. You can want to get out and about more, even though it's early in the year. But the new moon back in that more tender 4th house on the 18th is actually in a very strong link with Mercury and Mars, but they're embracing the energies of Saturn and Neptune and the disruptor of Uranus in a very much more positive way, and that could see you really speed up around some physical changes to your abode or that house move itself. But on the 20th, the Sun plays catch up with Venus along with Mercury and moves into Aquarius too. Now they come into an exact cazimi on the 21st. What a month for cazimis, incredible. That's when the Sun is amplifying the other player. And here Mercury comes out of that more reflective fourth house and is much more in the mood for play, being a bit cheeky and maybe a little bit provocative in the sign of Aquarius, but certainly much more social. And they're joined by Mars on the 23rd. So another big shift, and Mars moving into Aquarius is very much to do with groups, getting together with people, but also being much more proactive about the ideas that you've got that are creative, as you often do have. But on the 23rd as well, we have the fourth cazimi of the month. The Sun combines with Pluto, and Pluto since March 2023 for 10 weeks, and then pretty well the first half of 24, and then from the end of November 24 round to now, Pluto's been evoking within you an ideal about what you want, where you can manifest the most joyful part of your being. And I think the Sun being in conjunction with Pluto could see you shift something that's very important to you in a very dynamic way, and that's truly exciting. But also Neptune returns to your sector of relating on the 26th. If you recall, it did spend 6 months in this area last year, and it may have created some confusion around certain relationships, but with Saturn from the end of May through to the 1st of September, also in your 7th house, and returning to join up with Neptune on the 14th of February, and they come into a conjunction on the 18th of February. If you are early in the sign of Libra particularly, you're going to be very aware that what you want from a relationship is mutuality. You need respect. It needs to flow backwards and forwards, and there also has to be, as much as firm boundaries and a structure, there also needs to be some sensitivity as well, which is what Neptune's about. Now by the end of this month, it's Mars that's connected with Pluto. If there's anything that you feel inspired or passionate about, this is where you can add extra charisma, energy and thrust. It's a hugely exciting last 10 days of this month for you, Libra, and I think really what the first 2 months of this month just helps you to understand is how you've evolved within yourself ever since Pluto left Capricorn, because at times that journey probably was very challenging indeed. There may have been big rejections, there may have been parts of your family or emotional life that broke down, but what Pluto can do is also rebuild. It is the Phoenix influence, and now in the 5th house, blessed with all these dynamic energies towards the end of January, you can demonstrate a part of your being, your talents, your brilliance like never before. It is that incredibly rare to have all these players together, amplifying the part of your chart that is to do with fun, joy, play, romance. If you have children, their activities too can also come to the fore, so you come out of a more reflective, inward, perhaps even protective part of your situation and can really flourish as January comes to a close. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code ASTRO26, you'll get 50% off. All the best and goodbye. Welcome Scorpio to your in-depth monthly forecast for January 2026. I'm going to share some of the standout features of the month to begin with, then on screen the event chart right at the start of January, which provides a backdrop for the whole month. I'll then go through each of the influences in detail to give you a clear picture of what you can expect in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. A very warm welcome. Thank you so much for all your views, interactions, comments and likes. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, I have shared that over 50% of people who are regular viewers are not subscribers. Please do so now and help the channel to continue to thrive. You can also enjoy your free year 2026 deep dive Scorpio video by seeing the link beneath this one. So as we come into this month, there's a cluster of energy in the sign of Capricorn. The sun is always in Capricorn at the turn of the years, but it's Mars, your traditional ruler, that's very close to the sun along with Venus. And that's the really notable feature of the early parts of this new year. But Pluto, your modern ruler, is also going to be in the picture this month. As ever, we've got 2 lunations, but we've also got 4 cazemis. That's when the sun and another planetary player are exactly aligned in unison, and the sun amplifies the qualities of that player, and that includes both of your rulers this month. On the 9th it's Mars, and on the 23rd it's Pluto. So I can't wait to share that with you too. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code ASTRO26, you'll get 50% off. So on the screen now is your event chart, and you can see that cluster of energy in the 3rd house, including the charming Venus and the thrust and urgency of your ruler Mars. So your ideas and the way you express them can be amplified in their impact, because you can use the subtlety of Venus but also the urgency of Mars as well. So if there's something you're really excited about grappling with in the new year, particularly if it is an idea, it is a creative strand, or you just want to be more connected to people, that's something that's going to be very much within your compass. Now the moon's in a part of your chart that has an echo of your sign, the 8th house, but it's in the quick, speedy sign of Gemini, but it is linking very productively to the position of Pluto, your modern ruler. And that's in a part of your chart to do with your deeper world, your emotional environment. And that may be what you're thinking about, particularly if you're discussing remodeling your home in some ways, or going through the process of renting or buying one, then that could be what that conversation is going to be very much about. But the ruler of conversations, Mercury, is actually afflicted at the start of this month, not just because it's in detriment in the sign of Sagittarius, for you very much about everyday money, it's in a square with Neptune and also Saturn. If your ideas that would come from that cluster of energy in Capricorn are of a more speculative nature and to do with perhaps trying to earn more money in the new year, totally understandably, Mercury's saying in that connection to Neptune and Saturn, it's really important that you do your research and don't rush the process. You could have that fortune, but do take your time to really understand what's what. But Jupiter, the planet of luck, is in a very expansive part of your chart, and it is forging a pretty good angle to Saturn, which means that you should be able to balance your pragmatism with your more optimistic plans that you have in a pretty functional way. So as we come into the month later on the 1st, Mercury plays catch up with the posse in Capricorn and moves there. Mercury in Capricorn is very businesslike. Mercury can be about marketing. So if you have got a product you want to sell, or you've got an idea that's really igniting your passion, Mercury moving on from that square to Neptune and Saturn will help you with that, but perhaps not straight away. It needs to escape their clutches and advance into Capricorn a little more. But Chiron, very much to do with our vulnerabilities, has been rewinding, and part of your situation to do with your physical well-being. If you haven't felt quite as good as you might have done over the last 5 months, not a complete surprise, but actually Chiron forges a square to Jupiter at the start of this month, and it's just saying if you are going to be more conscientious or try to be more proactive in terms of your physical exercise or diet, just don't try to do too much too quickly. Now, we also have a full moon on the 3rd in its home sign of Cancer, so the moon really is blessed here. But it is in an opposition with your traditional ruler of Mars, and that can create quite a lot of tension. The moon's about being receptive and sensitive, and Mars is about that sense of urgency. If you do find yourself in the following 2 weeks travelling anywhere, particularly on a short journey, do buckle up, don't rush things. Mars can make us perhaps a little impatient, and the moon in the 9th house can certainly give us a desire to have a wider experience and change things up, and that could be part of that sense of urgency that you have. But what we do have on the 6th is the first of those Cazimis, and it's Venus. Venus amplified by the Sun, as it is at the start of the year. In modern astrology, they're in a conjunction. In traditional, that would be seen as a combustion and not so positive. But I think that Venus being so close to the Sun means that the way you express yourself can just seem to chime with others that much more effectively, not just in January, but potentially throughout the year. But for sure, when Venus and the Sun are totally unified, that ability to convey messages skillfully does get a big lift. But it's also great if you're wanting to be flirty with someone. And in fact, with Venus and Mars coming into an exact conjunction on the 8th, that could be a key moment if you are looking to forge a connection. But Jupiter and Mars come into an opposition at this part of the month, and that's saying to you, if you are wanting to impress someone, don't try too hard, but your enthusiasm may be very hard to resist, which in itself is quite wonderful. But it's on the 9th we get the second Cazimi. This time it's your ruler Mars, and that sense of thrust that comes from Mars very much to the fore. If you have been thinking about a new mode of transport, this can be a really important part of the month, but don't rush any decision. Do take your time. If you are someone who is up for internet dating, that also can be something that enters your thinking at this particular moment. But then we have the planets in Capricorn edging forwards, and they do start to forge a much more productive link to Saturn and Neptune, but also to Uranus in your sector of relating. I think the new moon, which occurs on the 18th, could coincide in the following 2 weeks with some very important conversations. But it doesn't necessarily have to be in a romantic context. It could be around a contract. It could be around expressing your creativity or flair. But you can have real impact. Don't underestimate the amount of gravitas that you can have on the back of that new moon. But with Venus moving on the 17th into the sign of Aquarius, and it is going to be joined by the Sun, Mercury and Mars before the end of this month, there is a big shift. And this is a shift that your modern ruler Pluto has been just gently but very powerfully arousing within your consciousness over the last couple of years about what you need from your home and emotional life. And that becomes the theme much more as we enter the last 10 days of the month. Now, the Mercury cazimi on the 21st is terrific if you are someone who wants to use your mind, but use your mind in relation to where you live. So it could be working from home, whether it is on a flexible basis, starting a small enterprise, or if you have an ongoing business, you can remodel your home in some kind of effective way with the energy of Mercury and the Sun. Your thinking can be quick, and if there are things that need to be discussed of a more personal or tender nature around the family, this could be a time of the month when you feel a very strong desire to say how you feel. But just be aware that with Mars moving into Aquarius and the Sun forging a cazimi with Pluto also on the 23rd, a little bit of impatience can creep in if you feel that someone's not really being very attuned to what you want and are saying. Mars in the 4th house can be a bit reactive, a bit grumpy, to be honest, a little bit up and down as far as our emotions are concerned. Pluto, of course, can be transforming, but it also can be the planet which hides things. Something around a family issue which has been painful could come up, and you could articulate it in a way that another person may find challenging, but it's all part of your journey to be much more authentic about who you are, because for sure Scorpio people can be quite blunt, very observational. Sometimes people can find Scorpios somewhat confrontational, but underneath that you can be very private about your deeper world. You may be surprised at the end of this month that you are going to ventilate some very tender issues that may have been kept hidden for a very long time. But if that does happen, I think it can be extremely cathartic for you and help you to release energies that maybe have been locked inside you in quite a negative or even resentful or hurtful way to you for some time. So if you do say to someone how you truly feel, even if someone you're very fond of and they don't find it easy, just go with this, because Pluto is an irresistible force. It is about transformation. The same goes if you do want to physically change where you're living. If there is that space that's never quite worked for you, if you find yourself with a lump hammer or tearing doors down with your bare hands, that's the force and drive of Mars and Pluto, your two rulers, coming together in an exact conjunction on the 27th. And that is going to be a very, very powerful event for you personally. Your drive and passion can be absolutely fantastic, and that can be something that you can use in a very productive way. But just know you're much less likely to be quite so sensitive to the needs of others as this month comes to a close, and more in need of saying how you truly feel, particularly if it is something that has been to do with a past hurt or injustice that you've kept locked deep inside you for far too long. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code ASTRO26, you'll get 50% off. All the best and goodbye. Welcome Sagittarius, your in-depth monthly forecast for January 2026. I'm going to share with you some of the standout details to begin with, then on screen your event chart, which provides a backdrop energy for the whole of the month. I'll then go through each of the influences in detail to give a clear picture which you can relate to in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell, a very warm welcome. Thank you so much for all your views, interactions, comments and likes. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please help it to continue to thrive. We have found that over 50% of people who regularly watch my videos are not subscribers. If that's you, please help us to see it grow into this new year. Also, if you've yet to watch your year 2026 deep dive Sagittarius video, please see the link below for more. So as we come into this new month, your ruler Jupiter is in a retrograde still, but it is forging two intriguing links. The first to Saturn, which is very much about containment, and Jupiter's about expansion, but in a constructive way, but in a square to Chiron. And Chiron does end its retrograde from July on the 2nd. So I'll unpack both of those for you. Now, in terms of your financial situation, this month looks really bright. And that's because you have a cluster of energy in the part of your scope that is to do with everyday money, but also your sense of self-worth. And one of them is Venus. And Venus can be very much to do with the good things in life. And that's going to be blessed by a cazimi with the Sun on the 6th. Also, Jupiter will go face to face with Mars and also with the Sun in week 2. That could give you quite a lot of desire to be more speculative, but also it could bring some good fortune to you as well. Now, there is going to be a combination of energy building up in Capricorn all through to the new moon of the 18th. But on the 17th, we have the advanced party making her way into Aquarius of Venus, to be joined by the Sun, Mercury and Mars in the latter part of the month. And you're going to see a big speeding up in your situation, which I will share more about shortly. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code ASTRO26, you'll get 50% off. But on the screen now is the event chart for Sagittarius at the start of the year. The big takeout is the moon's in your 7th house, and the event chart for January can also be an event chart for the year ahead, and that suggests your ability to tune into other people around relationships is amplified in a very positive way by the moon. The moon also forges a very powerful link to Pluto. Your words and your ideas, particularly towards the end of this month, are going to gain greater currency. Now, in terms of the planet that's in your zodiac sign, it's Mercury for the 3rd year running. Mercury, you may know, is detrimented in Sagittarius and also in a dreamy right angle with Neptune, and a little more broadly with Saturn, but also in a quincunx with Uranus. And Uranus is in the part of your chart to do with routines. If you're very much a bohemian, you want to do things your way, I feel that you just need to be mindful of it feeling right. Sagittarius people can be very bold, decisive, dynamic, but the start of this month is asking you to be a little bit steady Eddie, because later on the 1st, Mercury moves into the sign of Capricorn. It's very businesslike here, so if you have been ruminating on some ideas, as Mercury has made its way backwards and forwards from your sign back to Scorpio, back to Sagittarius, through that retrograde season, you may be just priming up, ready to go forwards. And what you're looking for with Mercury moving into Capricorn is solid foundations, more security and stability. And that's definitely something to savour. But just be conscious that that right angle, particularly to Neptune, can be quite distorting. So even if there is something that you're excited about, do be guided by your inner sixth sense. That will be powerful if you give it the space to express itself in your thinking. Now on the 2nd, the retreating Chiron goes direct, but it is in a square with Jupiter at the start of this month. If you have been feeling around your love life that things haven't been running quite as smoothly as they could have been, one of the things I would say, not just through January but through 26, is don't try to disguise some of the things that you've gone through. You can be larger than life, but actually I think that Saturn over the last couple of years has given you a lot of insights into what's to be gained by being in touch with your vulnerabilities, at times frailties, emotional needs, and not being hung up about that. So I wouldn't overgild the lily if you have experienced something tricky, but the 5th house where Chiron is can also be about speculation, and Jupiter can be about, in the 8th house, a desire to improve your financial situation. But I wouldn't be too buccaneering in your approach, and that's where Saturn's more steadying influence on Jupiter can be so good. You can see 26 degrees of Saturn, 21 of Jupiter, just slows Jupiter down a bit, makes it a bit more thoughtful, and it is in a retrograde initially. I don't see that as being ultimately unfortunate, just asking you to be a bit more thoughtful and be in touch with the emotional dimension, because the host Cancer is very much about our senses, not so much about our drive, passion, very Sagittarius, or more to do with our thinking, which is going to come more into your situation as January goes on. But Mercury moving on the 1st into Capricorn, as I mentioned, it can be very businesslike, but we have Mars as well as Venus, and along with the Sun as the reception committee. My word, what a great set of energies. Because Mercury likes being in Capricorn, and so does Mars. It's exalted here. And Venus may be a little more cautious when it comes to a love relationship, but also maybe helps us to appreciate shared values, which is what Venus can be about, and where someone may have a stability about them, which is certainly something that's very valuable in itself. Now, they're all going to go on to come into contact with the Sun. The Venus is the first one on the 6th, followed by Mars on the 9th, but Venus and Mars come into their own conjunction on the 8th. If there is someone that you're closely aligned to at this time, and it is an intimate relationship, things could get seriously sensual. Whether you enjoy good food together, making it, or it is sampling different wines, if it is about the arts, that sensual appreciation is definitely going to be amplified, but so can desire. But also you can become more aware of a relationship which isn't quite working, and one of the things with 2nd house energy, it can be a bit unyielding, a bit inflexible, and sometimes the best of relationships actually do flex a little bit. So that's going to be important. Now you are aware of this because you're a mutable sign. But those Cazimis certainly can amp up desire to improve your financial situation. But just be aware that Jupiter's on the other side of the heavens and joining in, and when we have the full moon of the 3rd, Mars is in an opposition with the moon, which could make you much more impulsive. Maybe about buying something in the winter sales. It could be around someone you're drawn to, and that urgency at the same time can also see the more emotional dimension, which is hosted by Cancer, which rules the sign, which is ruled by the moon, suggests that the desire to improve finances shouldn't be at the expense of what feels right or genuine connectivity. So there can be an urgency about improving your lot for sure, but it also needs to stay grounded and also feel peaceful. And the desire for things can really be heightened with Jupiter and Mars in an opposition, and also the Sun and Jupiter too. That may give you a lot of motivation if this is the year that you want to bring extra resources into your world and excite yourself with being more successful. Why not? If, however, you're trying to juggle your resources and manage a pretty tight budget, I feel you could surprise yourself by the level of ingenuity that you develop, and that will become more obvious by the time we get to the new moon of the 18th, because then the ruler of the sign of Capricorn and the depositor of the sign Saturn is linking back to that new moon, but also Mercury and Mars, and your thinking can be crisp, your way of expressing your ideas can be confident and passionate, but also you can be in touch with your emotional roots and the need for security and stability, and that's no bad thing. Having said that, Uranus links back to them too, so being open to new ways of working, new approaches to using your resources more skillfully, or perhaps even working for yourself, may call out to you. The 20th, however, sees the Sun join up with Venus, which moved on the 17th into Aquarius, and we start to see a speeding up for you, but your natural enthusiasm will really come to the fore in the last 10 days of this month. They're joined on the 23rd by Mars, but on the 21st we have the third Cazimi, Mercury, and your ideas can be crisp, dazzling and sparkle with effervescence. As we have the Pluto Cazimi on the 23rd, your passion for your ideas can really be very much more to the fore. But then Neptune returns to the sign of Aries on the 26th, and that's good because it gets out of this soggy fourth house where it's been for the most part since 2012. And if you have felt at times hugely affected by changes around your emotional or family life, having the furnace-like host of Aries, even if there is a complication between the watery Neptune and the fiery Aries, obviously water can extinguish fire, but I think for you it's better that Neptune is back here. It's actually starting a new journey for the first time in 165 years fully. Of course, we had that brief sojourn of 6 months last year. But as the month comes to a close, Mars and Pluto come into a conjunction on the 27th. This is intriguing. If you do have a debate at this time, you're really going to be very determined to punch your ideas across with vigour. But just be aware that Mars in a conjunction with Pluto can make us perhaps a little bit dogmatic. And if you are thinking about travelling around anywhere, don't rush the journey. I think towards the end of this month, you are going to see or feel a big shift. It will become much more obvious to you once Saturn returns to Aries on the 14th of February. We are moving into newer times. The energy of Capricorn has really been very much to the fore for us all collectively since 2008, when Pluto first moved back there for the longer term after an initial sojourn before then. And since then, the whole energy of Capricorn, which can be very much about the material world, has been to the fore. But you're someone with a real passion for ideas, and you have a view of the world that's often broad, and that's something that I think has at times been tested by the energy of Capricorn, but you can get your reward. So a lot of hard work you've put in since 2008, which you may have felt has not come back to you, could do so this month if you've really been industrious, but you've really also evolved with Pluto's help. Because if we resist Pluto, it can deconstruct our lives in a very painful way. If we accept that change is part of life cycle and Pluto is about ends and beginnings, something can be rebirthed this month in terms of your self-worth, your values, what's important to your life foundations, but also around your finances, but your appreciation of more natural foods. All of these things can really get such a boost, and then later in the month it's back into an arena and territory where you're really much more at ease, and that is about idealism. It's about moving around, it's about being excited to connect to people where your ideas and theirs chime, so you can make some fabulous enjoy some fabulous encounters towards the end of this month. But if you are someone who's influencer on social media, have your own YouTube channel, you've got ideas that you feel very strongly about, you can share them with incredible power and authority as this month draws to a close. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code ASTRO26, you'll get 50% off. All the best and goodbye. So Capricorn, at the turn of each year, the sun is always in your zodiac sign. But this year, you have the wonderful duo of Venus and Mars, either side of the sun. And they're both going to come into exact conjunctions with the sun in the early part of the year, which really does create a huge amount of excitement and positivity for you. It could be about brand new beginnings. It may be about injecting ongoing strands with greater flair and passion. But what's also going to happen on the 1st is that Mercury, the planet of communication, which has been going through a complex zigzag through your 12th and 11th houses, arrives in your zodiac sign. And that's really positive too. But as this month goes on, there is a bit of a juggle. There's a full moon on the 3rd in your opposite sign. What's that about? And also we have a new moon in Capricorn on the 18th. But I'm really delighted to tell you it's absolutely glistening with possibilities. But we do have on the 17th Venus moving into perhaps the most beneficial part of your chart for finance, and through to the end of the month good news could be heading your way. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code ASTRO26, you'll get 50% off. So on the screen now is the event chart right at the start of December. There's the sun in your zodiac sign, as he always is, at 10 degrees and 34. But you can see that we have Venus on one side and Mars on the other. Now in traditional astrology, Venus not quite being connected to the sun would be seen as being combust, and the sun will overpower the more magical and more alluring vibe of Venus. But I feel in modern astrology that's a very positive alliance, because the sun can certainly give us a lot of thrust, but what Venus can do is bring some guile, some nuance, some charm. And Mars, very much about desire and urgency, is in the mix as well. So it's really a message to you to believe in what makes you different. And that's going to be amplified by the new moon of the 18th. But Mercury, unfortunately, is locked away in your 12th house for the 3rd year in succession, in a very tender right angle with Neptune and Saturn, your ruler, and in a jarring quincunx with Uranus in a very creative part of your chart. So what does that mean? Although Mercury moves later on the 1st of January into your sign, I think some psychological energies can still be washing around, ones that have been quite powerful towards the latter part of 2025. I feel if there are people around you that you're not sure about, what this event chart's telling you as you come into the new year is you must concentrate on what you're doing and not worry so much if not everybody is understanding your qualities and your attributes and don't admire you as much as you might like. So there may be some fair weather friends that need to make way as you come into this month. But once you really go for it and become much more focused on what's important to you, there is so much potential. Now your sector of relationships continues to be lit up by the energy of Jupiter, the greater benefit. But Jupiter is in a retrograde. Don't worry, Jupiter forges a superb link to Saturn, your ruler, at the start of this new year. So if you're sincere in your relationships and what you're saying, any kind of relationship, people will understand that. But Chiron has been having quite the impact on your emotional world over the last few years, since around about February 2019, and since July it's been in a retrograde. It's going to go direct on the 2nd of January, and that will give you an opportunity to perhaps come to terms with some parts of your nature or your situation, perhaps in close relationships where you don't feel quite as seen or heard as you could be, and it is in a square with Jupiter. That square does really suggest that you shouldn't be too availing to people who haven't respected you as much as they could have done. And the moon, obviously very much about our emotional dimension, is in a very pragmatic part of your chart, and it's asking you to use that earthy energy to keep things solid, and it's actually in a very strong link with Pluto. So transformation around the foundations of your life is really possible, but particularly later in the month. So as I mentioned, Mercury, although it forges that jarring right angle to Neptune and Saturn, which could just make you more conscious of who perhaps has disappointed you over the holidays. There may have been some politics or an atmosphere or stuff you saw on social media that got you down a little bit. But Mercury pitching up in your sign later on the 1st is really saying, look, I love being in Capricorn. This is where I can really initiate. Mercury can be about marketing, for example, but the first house is very much the expression of your individual ideas. Now, if you're someone who has felt that you've existed in a bigger structure in a more comfortable way, I think you're really being pushed at the start of this new year to think about how you can really take a firmer grip on your life direction and be much more the leader. You are a sign of leadership for sure, and can often bring enormous wisdom and experience to situations. But if you are a creative, this early chart at the start of the new year glistens with possibilities, and that becomes much more obvious as we have the Cazimis which start to unfold for this month, which is extraordinarily rare. But before that, we do have the full moon on the 3rd. It's a full moon in the sign of Cancer. The moon loves being here, of course, but it is in an opposition with Mars. If there are tensions between what you want to do and the focus that the planets are suggesting that you should have on what makes you uniquely you, but there's someone around you who feels a bit pushed out, neglected, or doesn't feel you're being as considerate as they feel you should be, it may come into focus over the following week. But it's going to be an interesting second week of the new year because of Jupiter opposing the Sun, but also Mars. If there are some politics to play out, a bit of a tussle between what you are prepared to give and what someone else wants from you, it may show up at this early stage. But the combination of Venus and the Sun in the Cazimi on the 6th really can help you to showcase your ingenious ideas with the maximum amount of elan. So whether it is through a written document, a video, a discussion, people can be drawn by how you say things as much as the ideas you're presenting. Now, in a personal context, if you are footloose and fancy free, the energy you're giving out in the early part of this month can make people much more conscious of your unique being and your individuality. So your sex appeal is really going to skyrocket, and that becomes much more obvious on the 8th, Venus and Mars conjunction, on the 9th, the Sun Cazimi with Mars. But it's all about you having the confidence to not worry so much about what other people want and expect. I'm not talking about very close relationships, but if there are some peripheral energies that have been draining you, just push those to one side. Be single-minded. go for the goal that's important for you. You can gain an incredible amount of traction as the month goes on. But as I mentioned before, Venus is going to be relocating on the 17th. When Venus moves into the second house of each zodiac sign's chart, almost metronomically good news will turn up. Some kind of financial benefit can manifest itself in the second half of this month for you. You just need to keep going with the inventive, creative stuff that you're passionate about in the early part of the month. But on the 18th, the Sun, the Moon combine along with Mercury and Mars, we have a new moon. What a new moon! Absolutely crammed full of potential in terms of energy, ideas, conviction, authority, vitality. It's all about really going for it and perhaps taking a leap of faith, especially if you are someone who's a bit more on the cautious side. You really fit that archetype of the sign of Capricorn. You're really being primed up by the planets to seize an opportunity which is really quite rare, because that's a new moon that links superbly well to Saturn, your ruler. So the way you express your ideas, although they may be new, fresh, different, exciting, you can still get them across in a structured way that people can feel are real and are sustainable and are therefore authentic. But also we're going to have that collective of energy linking brilliantly to Uranus. And since 2019 March, nearly full time, apart from 4 months last year, Uranus has been really prompting you to be much more experimental. It may have shown up in your love life, it may have been around some interests and hobbies, it could have been around some of your own ingenious ideas. But all of those energies come together in a wonderful fulcrum on the 18th of this month. And in the following 4 weeks, it really can be an opportunity to turbocharge what you feel incredibly invested and passionate about over the following month. But then we have the Sun and Mercury playing catch up with Venus, followed by Mars. We also have more Cazimis. We have the Mercury Sun Cazimi of the 21st, and we have the Pluto Sun Cazimi, incredibly potent, on the 23rd too. Wow. And this is all about starting to see the creation, or the rebirth, if you like, of a new way of earning money for you. And if you can really go through this transition, it could be one of the most exciting things you've ever experienced in your life. But there could also be, to be honest, on the 27th, a big powerful disagreement over finance. And that's because Mars and Pluto are in a conjunction in your second house. The second house energy, it is about what we value. It can be about everyday money, it can be about our self-worth, it can be about our foundations, but it can also be what we're attached to in some ways. And that attachment issue could show up through the full moon and week 2 as well. But sometimes if we really feel that our talents, our qualities, our skills are worthy of a particular value, we do need to have the confidence to hold that. But of course we live in a world that's very competitive and very demanding, and where skills in some ways are downgraded because employers feel they can get the value, and if you don't offer what they want, they go for the cheaper option. So there is a dumbing down going on. So you may need to juggle that desire to get exactly what you're worth with the financial reality of what's out there. But in lots of different ways, if you have been really inventive early in January, you could start to see the fruits of your labour come through in a very potent way towards the end of the month. And even if it's around a hobby or interest that you're getting into at the turn of the year, if you're starting to get the hang of it, the enjoyment factor, the personal satisfaction, but the sense of enhancement of your value as a person can all show up incredibly powerfully as January comes to a close. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code ASTRO26, you'll get 50% off. All the best and goodbye. Aquarius, your in-depth monthly forecast for January 2026. I'm going to share some of the big themes of the month to begin with, then on screen your event chart at the beginning of January, which always provides an influential backdrop for the whole month. I'll then go through those influences in detail, which you can relate to in terms of your ascendant, sun, or the moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. A very warm welcome. Your views, interactions, likes and comments are truly appreciated. We have found that over 50% of people who regularly watch my videos are not subscribers. If that's you, please help us to continue to thrive and do so now. Please also click or tap the bell notification symbol. If you've yet to watch your deep dive astrology forecast for Aquarius for the new year, please see the link underneath this video. So as you come into this new year, Aquarius, we do need to be mindful of your two rulers. Your traditional ruler of Saturn, but also your modern progressive ruler of Uranus. And they're both in contact with Mercury, the planet of communication, which is in a very idealistic part of your chart at the start of this year. Saturn is coming to the end of a big journey that's lasted 29.5 years through the entire heavens, which will complete on the 14th of February. But for now, as you come into this new year, it is still emphasizing your everyday resources, your values, and your foundations. So Mercury being in a tense angle with Saturn suggests it is important to set your expectations realistically. Neptune's there close to the position of Saturn too, also angling in a fragile way to Mercury. So conversations, particularly conversations around group dynamics, will need a little bit of care. But Uranus, on the other hand, is in the part of your chart to do with your home and emotional situation. If you're wanting to change things around that, just be aware that Mercury is in the part of your chart to do with long-term planning, but Uranus can be a little bit disruptive. So just a couple of features about your rulers. But there's a lot of energy developing at the start of this year in the 12th house of your chart. The 12th house is deeply psychological. You had Pluto there for the long term from 2008. It completed its entire cycle in November 2024. As you come into this new year, Pluto's with you and is actually going to greet all the Aquarius players as they join up later this month in your zodiac sign, and that suggests a big shift is coming, but a very exciting and dynamic shift. But there may be some proverbial loose ends that you need to work with in the early part of this month. And if you're someone with a particular passion or interest in psychology, personal development, understanding what really makes us all collectively tick, but including yourself, what a fantastic opportunity the early part of January brings. But later in the month, it's going to be an opportunity for you to dazzle people with your unique individuality. So I kind of feel this January could see a number of old doors close, but not in a particularly sad way, more in a natural way. But you're preparing the ground for such an exciting new phase of your life, if you like, a new epoch. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code Astro26, you'll get 50% off. So on the screen now is your event chart right at the start of the year. There's that cluster of energy in the sign of Capricorn, including Venus and Mars. You might find yourself at the start of this year feeling quite nostalgic about a relationship or someone from your past. It doesn't mean to say that you will reconnect, but you may need to still process some of the emotion around that situation. But equally, there could be someone that you're attracted to in the here and now who's not totally available. So for some people, there could be some, clandestine's a strong word, but maybe some discrete connections building up. May just be some soundings. You may find yourself doing some market research around a big idea that you've got. But that more psychological dimension around relationships, because of Venus and Mars being so close to the Sun, really does seem to leap out. But as I mentioned, Mercury is in the part of your chart to do with your friendships, your network, your long-term plan, but is in its detriment in Sagittarius and is in a particularly draining right angle to Neptune, potentially limiting one to Saturn, and the obtuse angle to Uranus just suggests that whatever big ideas you've got, you may need a little bit more time to go into the new year to really work out exactly how they're going to play out. So I wouldn't necessarily make any very dynamic moves straight away. January really is the proverbial game of two halves, that classic sporting cliche. Although Mercury is in, for you, a very friendly location at the very start of the month and year, it is going to be moving later on the 1st, but will stay in touch with Neptune. And I think that shimmering right angle just asks you, particularly when it comes to your financial situation, if you are planning long term, just factor in you may need the first half of January to really think deeply about what your strategy is going to be. Because the collective that exists in Capricorn of Venus, Mars and the Sun can actually be of a great benefit to you and will be complemented later on the 1st as Mercury moves to join them, but it may require you just to step back a little bit, and it will be later in the month when you really emerge in the most incredibly dynamic of ways. But Chiron, often the point of vulnerability in a natal chart, has been tracking backwards through us all since July. And for you, in the part of your chart to do with quick communications, anything to do with technology, your relationship with neighbours or siblings, if you have got some tenderness around any of those areas, for sure, Chiron going direct will help, but it is in a square with Jupiter. Jupiter itself continues its retrograde, but as you come into this year, is actually in a very strong angle to Saturn, your traditional ruler. And what Saturn does is balance Jupiter's potential to overpromise. But Chiron could just tease that into the equation, so just be conscious of that. However, the moon is in the 5th house of your chart, and that's really exciting for the year ahead. Your sister air sign of Gemini and linking back to Pluto, so that gives you a lot of potential to share your enthusiasm, but also your appreciation of the big picture with a lot of passion throughout the month and throughout 2026. But then with Mercury moving into that 12th house, you really are just being asked to think very carefully. Use the first 2 weeks of January just to reflect, refine, and just come to terms with some things that may be coming to an end, maybe things that even relate to your long distant past. And that planning and research that you do is going to prove to be mightily valuable as the month goes on. But if you do find yourself on the full moon of the 3rd feeling a bit discombobulated, particularly around work, if there is a situation where you're not feeling seen or heard, you're not quite sure, maybe your energy feels a little on the low side. With the moon in an opposition with Mars very close to the Sun, you may even feel a little bit churned up. Your emotions could be up and down over the following 2 weeks. but stay with it, because Jupiter in your 6th house is in an opposition with the Sun, and as long as through the 2nd week of this month you just stay in touch with being a bit more protective rather than proactive about what you can do in the outer world, I think it's going to help you to refine very carefully exactly what's going to be important for you. But intriguingly, you could find yourself thinking about people from your past very strongly, and especially on the 6th when we have a Venus cazimi. Cazimis for this month are when the Sun applies in exact unison with another planetary player and magnifies the Sun's brilliance, increases the energy of Venus. And Venus here could see you, if you met someone over Christmas that you were drawn to, building up a connection, but you may want to keep it confidential. You may not want other people to know about it. There is a possibility for some Aquarius people that you're drawn to someone who's not fully available, some kind of clandestine connection. Or for other water bearers, you may also be thinking about whether a current involvement is really viable for the long term. But that involvement doesn't have to be romantic. It could be a friendship, often an area that's hugely important to you. And with Venus and Mars collaborating on the 8th, whatever you're feeling passionate about, it's going to be intensified. But then it's the Sun committing to Mars in a cazimi on the 9th. Now that could be quite tender, and if there is something that's in any way triggering you, it could feel nearer to the surface. If there is a sense of injustice, or you're feeling left out or excluded, I think in some ways you are being asked to perhaps articulate that. But if you are feeling a little bit vulnerable, it may be hard to do that in a way which feels really comfortable. Just know that as the month goes on and Mercury moves forwards and collaborates with the position of Mars and also the new moon on the 18th, some of the things that you do want to say, particularly around your work, will come to the fore, but you can articulate those messages very much more effectively. And what's going to help you is that Venus arrives back in your sign on the 17th. Venus moving into Aquarius is delicious because it really celebrates your ability to get on with lots of different types of people who may be very different to you without judgment, and that's a really very, very valuable thing. A friendship that may have felt that it was distant or you'd not heard from someone, they can get in touch. That can restore your confidence. And in fact, your confidence continues to build up from the 20th when the Sun returns to your sign along with Mercury, and they forge a cazimi on the 21st. Fabulous. Suddenly you're in the present. Those concerns and anxieties and perhaps that reticence that may have shown itself in the early parts of January are making way to a sense of traction, excitement, and really expressing your energies in a very dynamic fashion, which is going to be helped by Mars's arrival in Aquarius on the 23rd and the Sun's link to Pluto. And that's the 4th cazimi of the month, and perhaps the most important, because Pluto since March 2023 has really been evoking in Aquarius people a different kind of energy. And then for the first half of 24, and then from November 24 through to now, it's a chance to really evolve, transform, to release what's no longer working, because Pluto is very much the Phoenix planet, and sometimes things do naturally have to come to a close. So as you come into this last 10 days of the month, you're absolutely supercharged in a way which has not been perhaps the case for a very long time. And because of all these players in the sign of Aquarius, including Mars and Pluto coming into a conjunction at the end of the month, the conviction that you have is really going to be astonishing. So if you do find yourself at times earlier in January feeling a bit tender, feeling a bit vulnerable, feeling that things are going on around you but don't include you, just know that you are going to be the star of the show as January comes to an end. How's that going to play out? Well, you could give yourself a dynamic makeover. You may hit the January sales and give yourself a treat when it comes to your clothes. It may be that you're going to initiate a new beginning around a business idea. If you've got an ongoing enterprise, you can inject it with greater thrust, enthusiasm, drive and passion. But most of all, you're just going to restore a sense of vitality, conviction and authority. And as you come to the end of this month, some of those concerns at the start of January or uncertainties will have just completely dissipated, particularly when Neptune moves out of the sign of Pisces on the 26th, moves back into the fiery Aries, forges a great link to Pluto and those other players in Aquarius, early in Aquarius, and your imagination, your spiritual appreciation and flair can really also be ignited too. I hope you have a great month. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code ASTRO26, you'll get 50% off. All the best and goodbye. Welcome Pisces to your in-depth monthly forecast for January 2026. I'm going to share some of the standout themes to begin with. Then on screen, your event chart at the start of January always provides a powerful backdrop for the whole month. I'll then go through all the influences in detail, which you can relate to in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. A very warm welcome. Thank you so much for all your views, interactions, comments and likes. We have found, as I've said before, that over 50% of people who regularly watch my videos are not subscribers. If that's you, please do so now and help us to continue to thrive. Please also click or tap the bell notification symbol. Briefly, you can watch your year 2026 Pisces deep dive by seeing the link beneath this video. As you come into the new year, always the sun is in the part of your chart to do with your future planning. Nothing surprising there, but also to do with your connections to others, your network. But this year, that energy is strengthened hugely by the thrust of Mars and the charm and diplomacy of Venus. And I would say that year 2026 could see you forging some really exciting new connections. Now they're going to be joined later on the 1st by Mercury, but it is true that Mercury initially clashes with the two players that are just still in your zodiac sign of Neptune, your modern aquatic ruler, but Saturn. So just be aware when it comes to your goals around work, that it will be important to juggle what you want from situations and perhaps what other people's expectations are. And the collective in the sign of Capricorn can be a little bit idealistic. Now Jupiter, your traditional ruler, is also in the mix at the start of this year in a square with Chiron, the so-called wounded healer. But that comes out of a retrograde on the 2nd. What's the significance of that? We also have lunations on the 3rd and the 18th. The full moon on the 3rd is in the home sign of the moon of Cancer, and I'll share some insights on that. But you do have a really strong opportunity on the new moon of the 18th to move forwards in a very dynamic way, which at times may have felt somewhat out of reach over the last couple of years, as Saturn has seemed to slow things down, provide obstacles, lower your vitality. A lot of outcomes can occur for you from the month from the 18th where you've really flexed, adapted, released what was no longer good for you and focused on what was really important. But ironically, Pisces, the latter part of this month really has an echo of the core energy of your sign, which is very much about reflection. It is about culmination. 12th house energy can be very much to do with healing, spirituality, and caring perhaps for those who are less fortunate. So although you can come into this year feeling pretty upbeat, as the month goes on, I think the need to have a little bit more time for yourself could become a lot stronger for you. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code ASTRO26, you'll get 50% off. So on the screen now is the event chart. So there's that cluster of energy in the friendly 11th house. But having Venus and Mars together suggests that your connections to others could even see, for some fish, some kind of romantic connection too, perhaps through someone who's introduced by a mutual friend or joining up with a hobby group, and there could be some lively dynamics and energy sparking off. But there's Mercury right at the top of your chart. But Mercury is very much about how we think, but in the 10th house, how we connect to people who are influential. But Mercury in Sagittarius can have a tendency to be very focused on the big picture and not be so mindful of the details. And it is in a challenging right angle to Neptune in your sign. So that collective in Capricorn can be quite idealistic, and the Mercury position suggests that if you put a proposal forward, for example, to a position in influence, or you apply for a job and they don't feel that you're very clear in what you're saying, that may be to your disadvantage. But as I mentioned, that Mercury is going to be moving later on the 1st into the sign of Capricorn, where it really loves to be. But let's just be mindful of the moon at the start of this year. It's in your 4th house. So throughout January, but also throughout 26, even though there are those potentials to connect to others, it needs to feel right. Particularly as the moon's forging the link to Pluto in your 12th house, very psychological. Pluto's been making you much more aware of that part of your life, but also your resources and your past experiences full time since November 2024. And there's going to be a lot more of that towards the end of this month. So I mentioned that Mercury is going to move into Capricorn later on the 1st. And maybe if you are trying to work up a business opportunity, thinking about the things that you could share where you can emphasize your ability to be a good team player. You can be collaborative. You can show your leadership, but also respond to other people's direction as well. So just a little bit of a hint on that score. But on the 2nd, the backward retreating position of Chiron goes direct. Chiron has been, since February 2019, asking you to work on your sense of self-worth. And it starts this month in a square with your traditional ruler of Jupiter. Jupiter's in a flamboyant location despite its retrograde. But if you are drawn to someone, perhaps romantically, I don't think you need to make grand gestures. I think for Pisces people, often when things are really gripping you, you're all in. And Jupiter and Chiron can emphasize that, but I wouldn't be, trying to go too quickly, even if it is getting to know a new group of people. But I think one of your desires for 2026 in general will be greater connectivity, whether it's in your community, whether it's around a hobby group, whether it is around a sport, for example. The 11th house can be very much to do with that. Your passion can lie through greater connection, because I think you really have had to be a bit more conscious of just how much energy you've had over the last couple of years, and it hasn't been at its highest level, and life may have felt like it's shrunk a little bit, but what I think it has done is made you, or helped you, to focus on what's really essential. So you could flex outwards this year, I feel, but you still need to feel that the inner part of your situation feels right. But the Sun and Venus are going to come into a glorious conjunction, a cazimi, on the 6th, but not before we have the full moon on the 3rd. Your connection to others may be something you want to improve upon, but that actual full moon could see you surprisingly spoilt for choice. And you might also find yourself at a bit of a crossroads. If you're in a relationship where you're fond of the person but not quite sure that you have enough in common, or it is really one for the long term. So that may be something you need to work through over the following 2 weeks. Now Mars is in your 11th house and the moon's in the 5th. There could be a bit of a squabble if you're in a tie where you want different things, and the passion around that may be hard not to express. But as Venus combines with the Sun on the 6th, if you are really enjoying the company of other people, that's really going to be amplified. But Venus and Mars connect exactly on the 8th. If you're in a tie where you do have that simpatico, you are excited to be with one another, you can have the friendly banter, but also you may want to get much more physically intimate as well. Then Mars connects to the Sun and the cazimi on the 9th. That's all about having the vigour and the robustness of Mars to drive along your long-term passion and ideas. So that could help you to speed things up. And as the month goes on and we work our way towards the new moon, which occurs on the 18th, Mercury is playing catch up, and along with Mars on that new moon, angles back brilliantly to Saturn and Neptune in your sign. Now Neptune's going to leave you on the 26th, returning to Aries. Neptune, of course, was in your second solar house in Aries from the end of March last year for 6 months. It's going back there, it won't come back in your lifetime. Whether you really enjoyed Neptune, particularly if you're a creative with music or art, installations, through psychic work, through healing, you may have used Neptune extremely valuably since 2012. But Neptune at times can be distorting, illusory, confusing, draining. And maybe there have been times when that energy has played out as well. So that moving later in the month into the fire sign of Aries is a big shift. However, I feel that the new moon which occurs, the link to that last degree of Neptune on the anaretic degree, and also Saturn, but also Uranus, it brings a lot of potential, a lot of excitement. And if you have got a clear vision about what you want from your future, all of that can just seem to gain a much greater sense of energy. But you do have Venus moving into the 12th house on the 17th, joined by the Sun, Mercury on the 20th. They come together, cazimi 3, 21st. Mars plays catch up, 23rd. Then we have a Sun-Pluto cazimi. And an absolute game of celestial two halves starts to play out, Pisces, because as much as you may have set your intentions about greater connection, greater community interaction, greater fraternity, an increase in time spent with friends, becoming clearer about what you're passionate about for your future, a part of your nature which does actually like complete peace, maybe tranquility, maybe time in nature, maybe time in workshops, or maybe time in a retreat, or maybe time by water, or maybe time in just complete and utter silence, can really ironically appeal to you hugely by the end of this month. Isn't it interesting how the cycles of astrology unfold? So you could reach a high point in certain connections early in the month, but then be questioning them later in the month. But what you're going to be questioning is the true authenticity and sincerity of those connections. And if they are very robust, for example, friends who have been very solid citizens over a long period of time, if you have a few weeks when you're just spending a bit more time just recharging, taking a breath, processing, releasing, just having greater time for the more spiritual side of yourself, that's brilliant. Don't judge yourself for it. But you could, if you are a much more bubbly type of Pisces, if you've got a lot of Aries energy or Aquarius energy in your nativity, you may feel that, oh, where's everybody gone? And it may feel that you're a little bit lost and dislocated, but it's okay. It's just a period you need to work through. It's a period of bringing things to a close. And of course we do have the spring equinox, which will be the start of the Western tropical astrological calendar to look forwards to, and that will be a new beginning, but it's a new beginning that by that point the sun will have returned to your sign, you will have recharged, you will have started to find your meaning and purpose and the value of that meaning and purpose. So all this period of Aquarius energy does is just give you a chance to release, amongst all the good stuff, what still may be lingering, which may be draining you. And part of that could be some people that you like, you're fond of, but just that energetic exchange doesn't quite work, and having a few weeks away from some of those demands just gives you a chance to focus on you. Nothing wrong with that at all. And if anything, that's some of the lessons that Saturn and Neptune have been teaching you at pace over the last couple of years. If you've yet to order your personal forecast for the year ahead, you can do so, and you'll get 12 full months from when you order it if you order in January. If you order it in December 2025, you'll get the rest of that year 3 and the whole of the following 12 months. You'll also get your life roadmap report, which is truly influential in terms of understanding our life journey. But at the checkout, if you apply the code ASTRO26, you'll get 50% off. All the best and goodbye.